6'7". When I think 6'7", I usually think of John Quincy Adams and Andrew Jackson, of course. But my name is Mr. Beat, and it's Constitution Day. That's why I got the ridiculous powdered wig and costume. And we are celebrating Constitution Day by having a Founding Fathers tier list. And I say we because I'm joined by my good friend and fellow YouTuber, fellow political history YouTuber, William Fox of the channel Exploring History, although his channel is just now William Fox. There he is.
Hello. It's me, the rebrand guy.
Where's your powder wig at? You're supposed to wear your powder wig.
It's at the dry cleaners. I told them it was really essential that they get all of the lice and the filth out of it by 3 p.m. on Constitution Day. And they said, what is Constitution Day? So now I wanted to ask you the same question. What is Constitution Day, Mr. Beat?
Oh,
America's history teacher.
Well, wow, look at that. Well, the Constitution, this is the original copy of the Constitution I have in my hands right now.
It wasn't bought at a gift shop at the archives in DC.
Oh, this is the actual Constitution, and yeah, this was written in the year 1787. The main guy who wrote it actually was James Madison, who I made a video about recently. Anyway, so the date that James Madison and his buddies all signed it, ratified it is the fancy word.
Madison and the boys.
Madison and the boys was September 17th, 1787. So now, that said, it's a little misleading because the states also had to ratify and formally approve the Constitution. And so that was a process. It took several months, went into the next summer. But, Delaware, shout out to Delaware. Those from Delaware was the first state to sign on.
Good job, Delaware.
Within a year, though, like 9 states, the majority that needed to approve of it did. And so, yeah, ever since we've had it, and it's not our first Constitution. You know our first Constitution. What's our first Constitution? When I say our United States, what's the first Constitution? Lowercase c.
That would be the Articles of Confederation.
Very good. Articles of Confederation. You're passing the test here.
The pressure is on. I really wanted to make a joke about English common law or like the English system, but that'd be too annoying. So I'll just go with the actual answer to the question.
Oh boy, you're one of those students. Okay.
Yeah. Is it the Magna Carta?
No.
Yeah, no.
So I think so when we say Constitution Day, we're talking about this one. It wasn't until the 1990s that there actually was a big movement to have a Constitution Day. And I just learned this literally a few minutes ago. But apparently, going back to the 19-teens, so over 100 years ago, there's been somewhat of a push to get some kind of either Citizen Day, or Constitution Day. Well, long story short, in the 1990s, the movement grew to combine both of those. And officially since 2004, the federal government that's when the federal government Congress said that Constitution Day was an official holiday. And it requires that all schools that receive federal funds for the fiscal year that the Constitution lands in shall hold an educational program on the United States Constitution on September 17th. And so that means, like, when I was teaching,
you broke the law because you didn't teach it.
I mean, I taught the Constitution at that time anyway, so it was really easy. But if I didn't at least bring up the Constitution for a few seconds, theoretically, I could have gotten in trouble for that because your school gets federal funds. So yeah. Constitution Day.
I think it would be really awesome if the law said that no matter what subject you teach, you have to shoehorn in the Constitution. So like your gym teacher has to be like, let's talk about Article 2 before we play dodgeball.
Why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
Let's force it. Let's make it as awkward as possible.
I got Dylan here. Thank you so much for the super chat already. Wow. And the kind words. And I appreciate your support on Patreon as well. And Cyvlog is here. Hello. Declaration of Independence is on display at the National Archives.
It is. So
Yeah.
is some of the other documents are there as well, drafts and things, even with stuff scribbled in the side, in the margins, so to speak. And for a while there was an original copy of the Magna Carta as well. I don't know if that's moved on. Some of them rotate, but yeah, there's also a beautiful portrait of, I think it's one of Turnbull's portraits that he made in the mid 19th century, but they've basically turned it into a wall mural. If someone in the comments wants to Google that and correct me, please do. But it kind of comes off like a little church to the Constitution and the Declaration in there.
Do you remember when you rode that tour bus with my students and I?
I do.
That's where we
Yeah.
were going, was there to look to the archives to check
Yeah.
out those documents. That's pretty cool.
It's a really special thing, I think. Even, and I think one of the things that I want to bring up today, if you'll indulge me for 10 seconds, is just that I think that our founding documents and the founders themselves are really important. And what I think comes through really clearly, though, is that not all of them agreed on everything, and that in the end, they were human, and the documents that we created were just words written on paper. And that's what makes them exciting, is that they're not chiseled in stone, and the people who wrote them are gone. And so we, as the next generation, get to decide what we think about them, how we engage with them, and it's living in that way. And that's what makes today special, and what this conversation hopefully will do for all of you, is show off a little bit of that subtlety you don't get to examine when you're just brushing by and not getting the depth of Constitution Day with Mr. Beat.
Yeah, like I wanted to highlight this wonderful website. I've had him on before. Mark from Tarpea has this great page, and I should put it on in the description. I think I will, but this is like something you shared with me in an email, because I know he's corresponded with you. And
yeah,
but as far as the actual constitutors, we call them the founding fathers often, because they were these dudes who all created and signed the founding documents. But I mean, what that phrase actually means kind of can be debated, I think. And so if you're just going to say, and I like this, what he laid out here, a founding father is someone who either participated in the first or second Continental Congress, or they signed the Declaration of Independence, or they were in the first United States in Congress assembled, known as the Congress of the Confederation, or they were at the Philadelphia Convention, also known as the Constitutional Convention. That's the big one that happened in 1787. Or even you can expand the definition to those who were present at the state ratifying conventions for the federal Constitution. And so if you do all of that, if you include those conditions, in total, there were 1,969 men, nice, who participated in these sorry, I'm just turning into a Gen Alpha. 6 key assemblages of our nation's founding, as Mark put here. And the craziest thing, the thing that you pointed out in the email, is somebody who we're going to bring up today. I'm not going to reveal. There's one person of all these founding fathers that actually was at both the first and second Continental Congresses, signed the Declaration of Independence, was at the Congress of the Confederation, at the Constitutional Convention, and at his own state ratifying convention. There's only one person.
And his name is John Cena.
I thought you were going to say John Hancock.
No.
No, yeah. So we will reveal that person here. So I'm going to have that as a cliffhanger. Don't say in the chat. Don't spoil it, okay?
No spoilers allowed on Constitution Day. But if you were to take all of those names and narrow it down to a little bit more of a usable list, it gets in the range of like 360. And then
that's if you get rid of all the folks
who like only did like the state ratifying conventions and nothing else. But our list today, sadly, is not 360. Sadly. It's not for lack of desire. It's for our own ignorance. I don't know who like Jimothy McGuire is or whatever, number 357. So we can't talk about that person.
No, yeah. So I think we will do approximately 36 of the founding fathers. We're going to make a tier list. Tier lists have been around forever. And I've been doing tier
lists. Who better than people of our age bracket to do?
Yeah, at this point, like it's not cool anymore, but we're still doing it anyway. But yeah, 36 founding fathers I've picked here. I shared with you ahead of time my picks. However, you may disagree. That's what's part of the fun, is you might convince me to put them in a different tier. And we will just discuss these. We'll start off with an easy one just to kind of get the ball rolling. But first of all, let me share with of course, you go to the classic website Tier Maker. So to show everyone what that looks like here, I got too many tabs open.
Oh no.
So a lot of powdered wigs there, but also that's also a misconception. Not everybody wore the powdered wigs.
Franklin didn't wear a powdered wig, right? He wore the hat that he actually got in Canada. His raccoon hat, I think it was, that he got in Canada. He wore it around even in places like Paris to distinguish himself as a rugged American, but it was actually, well, it was American in the sense of North America, but it wasn't United States of America American. It was Canadian.
You're not thinking of Thomas Jefferson? I thought he did that. So they both did, maybe?
I think it was Franklin.
Oh, yeah, I could see that. They both were kind of the rebels of the founding fathers. They were trying to kind of the most, well, I don't know. Franklin in many ways was also pro federal government, but Jefferson was definitely not. It's like, oh, I'm not. And he was also when he was president, he wanted to at least make it seem that he was more humble.
Reducing the power of the federal executive. What's interesting about going through 36 different founders, though, is we'll find that Thomas Jefferson, when you put him up against some of the anti-federalists, was right in the smack dab middle of the spectrum of opinion that would be represented by the founders. So despite the fact that after the Constitution is created, he is a Democratic Republican and a small government agrarian Republican kind of person, he, at the time of the founding, by supporting and advocating the ratification of the Constitution, makes himself a moderate when placed between someone like George Mason or Clinton and then Hamilton or Adams. It's very fascinating.
Yeah. All right. Well,
don't get ahead of yourself.
V-Man, thank you. Always these obscure references to Puerto Rico, but thank you for your super chat. That seems like a possible video idea. So we have this guy first, is the father of the Constitution. We all know him. It's our boy James Madison. I just made a video about him. Obviously a president. Most people, actually, I said in my video that when we think of James Madison, I think even many Americans forget that he was a president. But yeah, he was the fourth president. But more, I think, popularly known as the guy who wrote everything down at the Constitutional Convention and the author of the Bill of Rights. What are your thoughts on Mr. James Madison?
Oh, well, I am a fan of his mind. And one of the things that I think is so interesting about Madison is he approached the Constitutional Convention from a holistic perspective. That is to say, he wanted to come at it from every possible angle, not just what was relevant now, and by now I mean in the 1780s, but what was relevant prior to the creation of the colonies and maybe even the settlement of the North American continent by the Europeans. So he was looking at places like even ancient Greece, the Roman Empire, the Swiss Confederation, Venice, perhaps, trying to figure out what went wrong with confederations in the past that might help the people at the convention design something better. And so he ended up coming up with quite a bit of, including, if I'm not mistaken, he wrote the Virginia Plan, which would have given representation in the elected legislature proportionally. And so big states like his Virginia would presumably get more representation, assuming they maintain their larger population over time. And the thing that distinguishes him, though, in my mind, if we're just talking about influence and thought, that's pretty big. There's a quote from Madison that I think is one of the most important things to keep in mind when you're thinking about American democracy, even today, which is that In Federalist 10, he wrote, "Liberty is to faction what air is to fire." Liberty is to faction what air is to fire. And in this sense, faction is like divisions and political parties and interest groups and things. And the idea is that in a free society, all of our interests are going to get piled together and they're going to conflict with one another. And the main challenge that the Constitution had to overcome was how to find a way that we could all live with one another and have a democratic republic that was maintained over generations. And we're having some trouble right now living with one another. And so I think that it's a good moment to be thinking about Madison and some of the designs that he put on the government for just moments like these when we're struggling as a country. So I think highly of him.
I think most people, regardless of their political affiliation, think highly of James Madison today. I think we recognize his pragmatism. Actually, I said that a lot in my own video about him, that he was probably the most pragmatic founding father. And then I look up PragerU and they put that in the title of their video about him. So it's well, me and PragerU agree on this.
The worst person you know just made a great point.
Yeah. They often get things right. The things they get wrong, they get really wrong.
Really wrong. Yeah.
But yeah, you referenced one of the Federalist Papers, or a quote from one of the Federalist Papers. He wrote several of those. Of course, worked with Alexander Hamilton and John Jay, was close friends with Thomas Jefferson, was heavily influenced by George Mason, but also at the same time, he was a guy who talked to everyone. He was at the Constitutional Convention. In addition to being the one who wrote everything down, he was the one who got to know as many people as possible one-on-one. He showed up early to the convention, but before most people arrived, trying to do just that. He spoke more than any other founding father at the Constitutional Convention, other than Gouverneur Morris and James Wilson. And a lot of people just assume, oh, he was a small, frail, quiet guy. No, he actually was, in my view, the more I've got to know him, quite influential because he was so personable one-on-one. I'm not necessarily sure about how great a speaker he was, but one-on-one, people liked him. They respected him tremendously. You just look at what some of the other founding fathers say about this guy. It's no wonder he was called the father of the Constitution, even when he was still alive.
And to illustrate that point a little bit, you think about two of the biggest rivals in the Washington administration, Jefferson and Hamilton. And when they were arguing about financial plans and the location of the Capitol, it was Madison who helped to foster some of that compromise. And so even if we can't transport ourselves back in time and see how Madison handled himself, just by nature of where he was in the rooms in which he found himself over the course of his lifetime, we must assume that he was either paying everyone lots of money to keep him around and sliding everyone colonial bills, pound sterling or whatever, under the table, or that he was extremely personable, as you just said.
Yeah. All right. So chat, let us know. Some of you have already let us know where you want to see him.
While Chad is making that decision, I do want to bring up a lesser known bit of writing that he did in Federalist 54. Of course, Federalist 10 is the big one. Federalist 51, which it might have been written by Hamilton, we don't know, is about ambition counteracting ambition. The Federalist 54 dealt with the issue of slavery, and I do think that while we're tiering these guys, we should consider that. And unfortunately, Madison was someone who wanted to compromise on that issue, but he does make a case in Federalist 54. We must deny the fact that slaves are considered merely as property and in no respect whatsoever as persons. The true state of the case is that they partake in both of these qualities. So, if you're comparing him to the people who thought that enslaved people were merely chattel slavery, he looks quite moderate, but he certainly is not expressing an abolitionist opinion in Federalist 54. And ultimately, a lot of these people at the Constitutional Convention were ready to make that compromise in order to have an American Republic of the 13 colonies come together in a unified federal government.
Yeah, as a slave owner himself, I think he's very similar to Thomas Jefferson with his views on slavery. He's like, yeah, it's bad, but let's just push it down the road, deal with it later. We need a republic now. You mentioned earlier that these men did not agree on everything. Well, probably the only thing that all of them agreed on was they wanted to break away from Britain, basically. Even some of them were like, well, should we even be a country? The 13 colonies all be one country? Is that, I don't know if that's going to work out, man.
Yeah.
So yeah, many dramatic differences. So it is quite remarkable how they were able to come together. But yeah, I think S tier is what most people are saying. Would you agree with that?
I would.
Good. Okay, because that's what I wanted to put him.
Yeah, I think we will need to reevaluate at some point. If we overstack the S tier, we might need to demote some people. But let's cross that bridge when we get there.
Okay. All right. So next up, we have a much more obscure founding father. Do you recognize this man?
I have no idea who that is.
Yeah, this is Richard Henry Lee. That's okay. Most people don't know who he is. He's a distant relative, though, of Robert E. Lee, like a distant cousin. But I came across information about him. I didn't know about who he was until, to be honest, perfectly honest, this past summer. And a lot of these founding fathers, I was learning about James Madison or Thomas Jefferson or James Monroe. And I was just like, I went on a tangent, or a rabbit hole, because I was like, oh, that guy sounds interesting. And so
yeah, me too.
Full disclosure, I'm no expert on the founding fathers. Okay, that out of the way. So Richard Henry Lee brought forth a resolution that said, quote, "These united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states."
That's weird. I didn't hear an echo when you said that.
Really?
When I watch your videos on the internet, as I sometimes do, usually there's an echo when there's what's going on?
It's because I have God has shined his reverb on certain things that I say for it. No, I don't know.
On the fourth day, God created reverb. Okay. Sorry to interrupt you.
Anyway, so that resolution is known as the Lee Resolution. And without it, there would be no formal Declaration of Independence. So technically, there would be no United States of America at all. That's why I was like, okay, I got to mention this guy. Although, other than that,
yeah. So he is an anti-federalist later. So he actually opposes the Constitution once it's actually gets to that point. So he's in support of independence, but then he opposes the actual Constitution. And one of the reasons I think he has to be moved into even more obscurity is because his most famous writing as an anti-federalist might not have been him. So it's not clear who actually wrote it, because when these people were arguing about the Constitution after the convention, they were using pseudonyms. The most famous is it Publius? That's what the pen name for Madison and Hamilton was. Cato was an anti-federalist pseudonym, and in this case, we don't actually know. It's someone who wrote letters from the Federal Farmer. So this is Federal Farmer. Anyway, it writes, "One consolidated government of the United States leaves the power of the government and the representation of the people so unnaturally divided between the general and state governments." That's a word salad, but basically what he's saying is that the system's too convoluted to function, and so eventually it would become tyranny because power concentrates towards the top. At least that's how I understood it to be.
Okay.
Yeah, so D tier, because that's not very clear criticism, and it might not have even been him.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah. So that's our next one. For some reason, this is okay. So I agree. D tier is completely reasonable for Richard Henry Lee. I didn't say this yet, but we, in terms of what I view as criteria for ranking these founding fathers on this tier list, I'm looking at 4 things. I'm looking at influence, ideology, leadership ability, and legacy overall. So with that in mind, D tier for sure makes sense.
I have my criteria too on my phone here.
Go ahead.
Also, attendance, influence, and similar to you, acts to secure Constitution or their preferred system of government. Were they a hypocrite? Do I like them? And were they prescient? So did they say things that would prove true over time?
Dang.
No, I'm not going to apply that to everyone. That'd make this video far too long.
Yeah. So some already saw this. Henry Lawrence is the next one, and he's another obscure founding father, I would say, who I didn't know much about until recently. But I think, in addition to being the president of the Continental Congress for a certain extent of time, I think he was, more importantly, a really important diplomat and during the actual revolution. So he was one of the ones who was reaching out to other countries to get support. I mean, we always focus on our relationship with France during the revolution, but it wasn't just France. There was other countries in Europe that American diplomats were trying to reach out to varying degrees of success. But apparently, the more I learn about Henry Lawrence, the more I realize, oh yeah, he was actually a big part of that process.
What did you learn about what he did? And did you learn? I'll admit, I didn't know this guy at all. He could have been the ancestor of Ralph Lauren. If you told me that, I'd believe you, because I really don't. I don't know him at all. And what I saw in my research was that he was part of the delegation in Paris that would negotiate the Treaty of Paris, like Franklin, but that he left because of some sort of a fire or something. And so he didn't really get to be there for the actual completion of the peace process.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what like his actual diplomatic efforts led to besides him going back across the ocean.
Well, he was not only he worked in France, yes, but he also got Dutch support for the United States. And he also worked with British diplomats trying to negotiate an end to the war. So I think it's like he's one of those guys who never got much glory. He did a lot of behind the scenes stuff, and I was like, oh, you know what? This guy deserves a mention. So
F tier. Henry. F. A B C D E F G H I J K L M N O P tier. Okay, D.
So D, yeah. Let's see what I had him at. And chat, let us know where you would put him. I also had him at D tier. So, I mean, but just the fact that he's mentioned out of the 360 founding fathers, I think
he's already made the top 10%.
There you go. So, although he got some love in the chat, some said he should be C tier. Okay,
all right, chat. Okay,
you're just being nice.
Yeah, these people are gone, chat. They're not going to see this video. It's okay.
Yeah. All right, we're going to keep it with obscure. In fact, this next one is obscure, so obscure that I confused them with somebody else. I thought that they were a completely different person. So this is not Charles Coatsworth Pinckney. This is just Charles Pinckney is the next one. And
there he is, handsome guy.
Oh no, this isn't even him. That's not even him. That's the different somebody else. Okay, I forgot. I mixed up pictures here. This is John Rutledge, another John. Okay, John Rutledge. Now, this is somebody I did actually hear of before researching for this live stream. When I used to teach middle school American history, there was a curriculum called History Alive. And John Rutledge was one of the characters in which students could reenact. This is a curriculum that encouraged students to get into character and pretend like, in fact, that's when I used to dress up for my students. Like sometimes I dress up as George Washington. Sometimes I dressed up as Benjamin Franklin, to spice it up. And John Rutledge was one of the characters who actually had lines when we acted it out. And so that's why I kind of was aware of him. What do you know about John Rutledge?
So again, I didn't have that background of having him in a school play. So I had to use the old Google machine.
Yeah.
And so signer of Declaration, Articles, and Constitution. So he participated a lot. And I have him here as the Committee of Detail, which was the group that drafted the full first version of the Constitution. So maybe one of the drafts you'd see at the archives we talked about earlier. I also saw that he's kind of an interesting guy in that he advocated for the protection of the institution of slavery quite vociferously in Madison's notes.
He did.
But unlike other Southerners who would have couched that in like, let's say, a more anti-federalist way, that is like a limitation of national power, because just to explain, like, if you're in this period, if you want the institution of slavery to continue, you want a weak national government that can't abolish it at some point. That's my Cliff Notes version of how it went. This is someone who actually advocated for broad national power in Madison's notes. So he, as far as I know, went on to be someone who advocated for the Constitution while actually being quite vociferous in his defense of slavery. So he's obscure, right, but unique. Like if you had one of the quadrants or the Venn diagrams, he wouldn't quite fit into it.
Right. Yeah. No, you know more than I do on some of this stuff. Come on. Yeah. Rutledge was the thing that I remember the most about the History of Life curriculum. Was he was the one who defended slavery. He's from South Carolina, was the governor of South Carolina, kind of really was the poster child of that state in many ways, because he was like the most influential figure from the state at the time, in the 1780s at least. And
Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, apparently.
Oh yeah, he was later part of the Supreme Court. He was the Chief Justice for a little while. But that's why it's like, okay, he's pretty influential in terms of things such as the Three-Fifths Compromise. I think you wouldn't have a Three-Fifths Compromise if you didn't have John Rutledge, in my opinion. I think that's a little bit conjecture, but regardless, the fact that I think when we look at founding fathers, oftentimes I think have a bias to look at Northern voices. And so I think I would put him at either a C or D. At first I had him at a D. But I don't know. Like, what are you thinking? What are you thinking here?
I mean, I think he's between the two, but given that, like, because of participation, you could argue that he should be ranked above D. But I'll be honest, like, I think in terms of influence and the fact that I don't know any notable quotes from him, even despite the fact that I would again put him in the D category for me.
Okay.
But I default to you in the chat. I think there could be an argument to bump him up to a C.
Okay. Right now, I'm getting both D's and C's. Let us know, chat.
I also can't recall who, but there's someone else that I thought was really important for the Three-Fifths Compromise, which I believe was done through the Three-Fifths. Yeah. I'm saying that correct? Three-Fifths Compromise.
Yeah. Yep. There was.
There was like a whole committee of people involved.
There was.
Which, along with the fugitive slave and then the provision on the 1808 ending of the slave trade, like, I don't know. I personally don't know if I feel like these should be things that put people higher in the ranking.
I get it.
Yeah. It's like, if someone's involved in the Connecticut Compromise, I'd say, that moves them up. But it's hard. I know we're not supposed to apply our morals to these.
That's the thing.
Historical moments, but
that's why I had him as a D. Most people are saying D. So John Rutledge, I think you're going to still go there. I was hoping that we'd have a stronger case. Although somebody did say A+, I think they were not being serious there.
Okay.
John Rutledge is D. So far we have James Madison and duds. So let's. But this next one is certainly not a dud. This next one is somebody you may have heard of.
Who is that guy? Is that Abraham Lincoln?
William Penn, maybe? No.
Yeah. Is that King George the Third?
We're not funny. Okay. George Washington. So I think we can already safely say S tier. Can we just get this out of the way?
Yes.
Okay. But no, let's run down why George Washington was specifically an important founding father. I mean, I would say he's the most important American to ever live. He's my favorite president. He was the first president. He really was the father of the country. I think he earned that nickname. In my humble opinion, the best
American Cincinnatus.
The American Cincinnatus, the best leader we ever had. He did not want the power. Everyone else around him said, no, you're the man for the job. You're the only one for the job. You're the only one that deserves this much power to be the first president. Led the Continental Army during the Revolution. So he was out there with the troops against all odds. Then after the war was over, he's like, I don't want to I'm going to go home to my plantation and then just kind of live a quiet peaceful retirement. And time again, people are like, no, dude, we need you. And including during the Constitutional Convention, which 1787, he was the one who, in the summer of Philadelphia, when they all were meeting up, he was the one who kind of was the manager. Together with James Madison, I think those two were the ones who kind of just kept things going at that convention. Later on, like the guy who was overwhelmingly elected despite no political party, people across all factions loved this man. He truly brought everyone together. It's very, very rare in history where you can have somebody have so much had so much respect. Everybody respected this man in the colonies. Probably, I haven't read much about it. I like in terms of what the British actually thought of him, but in terms of Americans, like just universally loved, even to this day, considered by many to be the greatest president we ever had. What I miss?
I think you've missed a lot of the things that. So I think you're broadly correct. I find Washington extremely challenging to analyze sometimes because he was part of his leadership style was being that blank slate for the most part, letting people believe about him what they needed to believe about him. And that's why he was able to rise to the top and be amenable to everyone. Behind the scenes, he does seem to have, if you read Ellis's book called The Quartet, which is about Hamilton, Hamilton, Jay, Madison, and Washington, and some of their behind the scenes correspondence leading up to the Constitutional Convention, you know that Washington was probably at heart more of a Federalist, but because he had that Virginian background, because he was a Southerner, he was able to ride the line so nicely that he's ultimately like the grand compromise person, basically, of the founding. And you could see that, he basically gave the Constitution cover for his first two terms before partisan acrimony took hold. He also, regarding the Articles of Confederation, basically wrote an open letter that said, we're either a united people or we are not. And that is at a time when people did think of themselves as the state first, not as Americans first. An American identity did not exist at this time in the form that we have it today as a unified people. And ultimately, these big, broad sentiments from Washington like that, where we're either united people or we're not, everyone else gets to deal with the detail, and he gets to sit above it all and say, I have this one single line of vision, and whatever it takes to get there is what I will advocate. And like you alluded to, the tradition of term limits, when it comes to regarding where our capital is located, and some of the warnings that he gave us about foreign entanglements in parties, even if, you could argue about who authored these things, or if he really resigned after two terms because of some sort of tradition, or whether he was just, tired. These are all up for debate, but the bottom line is that as our first president, he wasn't a bad one to have. And if I could just say one more thing before we automatically put him in the S tier, which is that, he in the Whiskey Rebellion used force against Americans, and that would ultimately be something that was threatened by Andrew Jackson and then actually done by Abraham Lincoln in the Civil War. And so Washington also set a very important precedent that kept the Union together past its first century, basically. So he held it together once via the Revolution and the Revolutionary War, twice at the Constitutional Convention, thrice as president, and perhaps fourth from the grave when it comes to federal force to keep the Union together. S tier.
Known more for his leadership abilities than for his ideology or any kind of policies. I think one of the rare times he did speak up at the Constitutional Convention, it was to say, we need only so many representatives per constituent. Like, he was passionate, apparently, about how we need to make sure we have true representation in the House of Representatives. If he was around today, he would be horrified by that. But also, he'd be horrified by the political parties too. So I guess I think that it's just so refreshing to me to have this figure who didn't want the power, but everybody gave it to him anyway, and it's kind of like, okay, I know a lot of people have not seen the show Game of Thrones, but I think Game of Thrones, you learn a lot of social studies watching that show, and just don't want to spoil it too much. At the very end of the series, like you kind of find out, oh, somebody who never aspired to be in charge is in charge because who else is going to do it?
Samwise Gamgee.
You're mixing Game of Thrones.
Is it Boromir? Okay, never mind.
You're mixing up stories.
Gosh, I don't know. Jean-Luc Picard.
Oh, no. Have you seen Game of Thrones?
I've seen the first couple seasons.
Oh my God.
So I know this isn't relevant to our tier list, but I gave up on Game of Thrones. Books and show.
Oh.
At some point. Yeah.
I like it all. I even like the last season.
Wow.
Yeah, I love it all. Okay. Oh, we got some more super chats. Thank you so much, everyone. I want to make sure I went.
Yep.
Fat Man says, I love your presidential songs. Well, thank you. I wanted to ask if you ever released the instrumentals. I released some of them privately to, like, some people requested them, and I did the best I could. Sometimes I can't make instrumentals out of them, but if you send me an email, I can see what I can do for you.
Yeah. Karaoke versions.
That's right. Sci vlog again. Okay. In an event there about the Boston Tea Party, the host asked tongue-in-cheek if there were any Brits. He's British himself. I've been there. Have you been to the ship in Boston where you actually can dump tea?
No, I haven't.
It's the Boston Tea Party Museum. It's on a ship. It's pretty cool. Thank you, the fantasy. Interesting name there. Hope Thomas Paine will score highly in this list. Oh, yeah, he's coming. Don't you worry. Thomas Paine is coming. Okay. Before we get to Thomas Paine, though, we have another obscure person. Yeah.
Oh, gosh. I don't know who that is, but I don't know who that... I wonder if he had issues with snoring, though. He seemed to be... He's got a honker there.
Oh my gosh.
Who is that guy?
This is William Livingston. So William Livingston, lesser known, obviously. I put him as a D tier, just full disclosure already. But he made this live stream because he was a big reason why New Jersey got on board with the Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
He was a signer of the Continental Association, signer of the Constitution, governor of New Jersey. Just influential dude in New Jersey. That's why I was like, okay, we have to have the Garden State represented here. So let's put William Livingston in there. Plus, there was another reason that I don't recall, but I got an email once from somebody who just went on and on about William Livingston. And there's other Livingstons. Don't get confused with Robert Livingston. That's not the same person. He was another founding father. Did he even make this list? Did we put him on here? I don't think Robert Livingston made the list. Ooh, he could be on here too. Robert Livingston. Do you know about Robert Livingston?
You mean William Livingston?
No, no. Robert Livingston was he was from New York, and he's, I believe, a relative. I mean, surely he is. I don't want to make assumptions here, but yeah, like
I have Robert Morris, and
Robert Morris is not Robert Morris.
No, okay, no.
Okay, so what do you know about William Livingston?
So, okay, let me move my microphone back. I have that he was in Madison's notes, not very prominent, but his name is on the Constitution, so he signed it. I also have, like you mentioned, that he was involved in New Jersey. What I have is specifically like the major contribution that he had was he chaired a committee regarding another compromise on slavery, but a different one to the 3/5 compromise. So his committee found a compromise regarding the slave trade itself and whether Congress could make laws regarding that trade. Ultimately, what happened was the prohibition of the slave trade was codified in the Constitution, but only after 1808. Now, that is in contrast to two other alternatives. One is that Constitution could have barred the slave trade altogether right from the get-go, or on the other end of the spectrum, the Congress might not have been given power to do anything about slavery at all. So the compromise was made to bar it after 1808. And my understanding is that he was involved in the committee that came up with that compromise. That's pretty much all I know about the guy. And I don't have, like, for disclosure for the chat and for everyone watching, I made an effort to like find things like notable quotes from these folks, right? Like writings, letters between each other. And this is one of the ones where I just like, apparently he was a pamphleteer before the war, but didn't do a whole lot of notable writing thereafter. So I don't have much intellectually from the guy.
I think this is the problem. One of the major problems with history is oftentimes the best communicators are the ones who get all the credit for everything and have the most power. Yeah, like I think I'm also biased to like put him even on here because, oh, he was brought up to me by a viewer. Like, yeah, he's clearly going to be D tier.
Yeah. I did find something where he wrote, when I was looking for things, he wrote that he owned 2 slaves, but quote, I freed my 2 slaves as an example to others. My understanding is that he actually had the New Jersey legislature do that, like pass a law to free his 2 slaves.
All right.
D tier.
D tier, William. Sorry. Yeah. So you probably knew more about him than I did, because like what you were just sharing, I did not know.
I learned more about him than you did, but I did not know anything about him.
All right. Well, this next founding father is a much bigger deal, so let's jump to that. This is, recognize him? I mean, I know you know who he is, but
is it Paine or Henry?
Yeah, it's Thomas Paine. They do look similarly, don't they? But Thomas Paine, of course, which I already had people in the chat mention him. I think he was one of the most important founding fathers. Somebody who kind of, as I alluded to earlier, gets a lot of credit because of his communication abilities.
Right.
He was a very passionate speaker and writer. Didn't actually have much political clout in terms of lawmaking. But before, like in the early stages of the American Revolution, Common Sense, his pamphlet that said that, I mean, the core argument that was that the United States was not only deserved to be a separate country breaking away from Britain, but it was destined to, I think it arguably did more to stir popular revolutionary sentiment than anything else. I think it's one of the most influential pieces of literature and history, at least modern history.
And in terms of like the American pathos, as in like the American sensibility, I mean, we haven't gotten to Jefferson yet, but I think Thomas Paine is one of the American sort of, like when you think about like what's the stereotypical American attitude, right? And some of his writings in this 47-page pamphlet, despite the fact that, you know, we could talk about whether it's truly coherent or whether intellectually it had much of an interesting basis, it's more about his provocations and the sentiment, almost like the populism that comes through. For example, being like, it's not natural. Like everyone thinks that it's natural to have a king, you know, someone up top. It's not natural to quote it's not natural or religious to distinguish men into kings and subjects, right? So independence is the only rational course. Now, was it? Did the other founders agree? Actually, no. Like, I think even someone like Jefferson would talk about a natural aristocracy and like some are born to lead, some are, you know, more industrious than others. So like these distinctions that maybe in our current era we find a little offensive, you know, would have been just fine with the founders. And Thomas Paine comes in and sort of like with a smashing hammer breaks down some of these presuppositions that undergirded the leadership or the kingship of George III. Virtue, he said, is not hereditary, neither is it perpetual. Again, it's tearing down the idea that you know, someone could inherit the trait of leadership like a king, and that could go on for a long period of time. And beyond Common Sense, he also wrote about the American crisis during the Revolution. Quote, "These are the times that try men's soul." Right? So he's the emotional leader of the revolution. And what makes him go down the list in my mind is that he drops off the face of a cliff after this point. Oh, and he's an abolitionist, from my understanding. Or
Okay.
at least, yeah.
Yes. He is
Sorry.
not only an abolitionist, he is like, there's a good argument that he was an atheist. Like, he was officially a deist like Jefferson and Madison. But I'm pretty sure, like, the more I read about him, he was like, I mean, he talked trash about religion during a time where you just didn't do that. He also, like you said, he was against slavery, but not just against slavery. Like John Brown, I don't know if he liked Paine at all, but he probably would have got along pretty well with him because he was like fiery and blunt. He was just so blunt about everything. He just told it how it is. And that's one of the appeals of, populist demagogues in general, like Huey Long or Donald Trump,
And
like
he's a polemicist. I think he was also admired by writers like the late Christopher Hitchens, who made his whole career being a contrarian, wrote a book called Letters to a Young Contrarian, if I'm not mistaken. It's no surprise that he would look to someone like Thomas Paine, who effectively took the positions of the British royal government and said, nuh-uh.
But part of the problem, I think part of the reason why he isn't viewed as highly as other founding fathers is because he attacked other founding fathers, including George Washington.
Really?
He talked trash about George Washington at one point when he was president. So I just think that's, it's somebody I've always admired, but at the same time, I can see why he's not elevated to that same level. I put him as A tier. What are you thinking?
I was between B and A. And the challenge for me is that he's so instrumental before and during the war, and then he's just kind of gone. I don't even know where he didn't die, right? He didn't die until the 1800s, so I don't know what he was even doing.
He's like Rudy Giuliani, who's somebody everybody knows and loves after 9/11, and then just kind of just
then he decided to wait in the Republican primary in 2008 until Florida with all of his anyway. Okay, I'm gonna keep it interesting. We'll let chat decide. My vote is for B tier.
Okay,
because ultimately on Constitution Day, this is someone who didn't have much to do with the actual Constitution,
right? But we're just talking about founding fathers in general, so it's not just.
I gotta have a reason, Matt. I gotta have a reason.
Chat's mostly saying A so far, I'm noticing. Okay. But there's a B.
I think A is fine. I think he was like a A minus, but I know that's not an option. So,
all right, we'll put him at A. Let me see if I can find him here. Oh, where'd he go? There he is. Our first A, Thomas Paine. Okay, next up, we have somebody else who's you probably don't know. I'm sorry.
I do like his collar.
He's another person who, when we did these History Alive reenactments and when I taught 7th and 8th grade social studies, he was one of the characters. Luther Martin of Maryland.
Oh.
What do you know about Luther Martin?
Luther Martin of Maryland was an anti-federalist. He liked to talk. So he gave a marathon speech opposing the Constitution. And his main critique was that the Constitution lacked those protections that would eventually be codified in the Bill of Rights. So we'll probably talk about that later. But what I think is really interesting is that what ultimately people like this could be construed as constructive contrarians, right? Because his biggest problem at the Constitutional Convention coming out of it was the Virginia Plan. The original Virginia Plan was the idea, like we mentioned earlier with Madison, that the bigger states, that is the states with more population, would have bigger representations in the legislature. And eventually there was a compromise on that because people thought, what about the small states? But people like Luther Martin probably inspired that compromise by being so darn vocal.
Yep.
So he said the Virginia Plan would be ruinous, destructive. I would rather confederate with any single state than submit to the Virginia Plan. So like he went hard on the Virginia Plan.
Yeah.
He also, I noticed, this is like fun fact, and I learned this from the Google machine. I don't have this in my brain. He defended Aaron Burr in his treason trial.
He did.
as Maryland's attorney general. So that's kind of fun.
Yeah, very popular in Maryland, not as much outside of Maryland, but and actually, I think he wasn't even from Maryland. I think he's from New Jersey or something. Anyway,
according to my screen, he's giving you a dirty look for not knowing where he's from.
Well, the thing that stands out to me about him is he's the dude who walked out of the Constitutional Convention. He just stormed right out saying, I'm not going to support this crap. And was very dramatic about it. Yeah. Like just because he was just like, this gives way too much power to the federal government.
Yeah. He also said it's a quote, perfect medley of confederated and national government without example and without precedent. But he didn't mean that like, I mean, when we think of the word medley, we think of like, I don't know, like tomatoes and olive oil, like, oh, the perfect medley of flavors or something, right? But like, that's not what he's saying. He's saying like, this is a mess.
Mm-hmm.
It's a mixed system. It's got a national government and it's got these confederated aspects to it. You know, we could talk later about the 10th Amendment to the Bill of Rights about reserved powers and things. And I mean, our Constitution is a mix. And we can look back and say, I'm so glad that our Constitution is a mixed bag, that, you know, there's separated powers, and there's separated powers not only on the national level, but on the national to state level. We can say that's amazing. But he was back then being like, this is a hodgepodge. This is a mess.
Yeah. So far it's looking like the chat's not too like enthusiastic about Luther Martin, but let us know where you want to rank him. I put him as a D personally, but I assume you probably.
I would too. We could flip it and make him Martin Luther, and then and then I don't know. We could
not to be confused with Martin Luther,
nor Martin Luther King.
Correct. Luther Martin. Well, we don't have an F tier. Robert La Follette. Oh, we're getting somebody saying C.
Attacking his speech, 3 hours, attacked national power, defended state sovereignty, and attacked the Virginia Plan.
I'm going to go ahead and put him at D. Yeah.
I think that's where he belongs. We couldn't put him at M tier. That doesn't exist. Martin at M, but D will have to do.
Next up, we got this young man who
Michael Cera, very famous founding father.
No, it's not Michael Cera. It is Edmund Randolph, who was another character that my students played. Was somebody who I think you were referring to earlier, because another Southerner who had influence on the Three-Fifths Compromise. I could be wrong. That's based off my memory. Let's see here.
I don't have that in my notes. Okay. I have him that he was the person who took Madison's Virginia Plan, and he actually is the one that read it out. So
he introduced the Virginia Plan. Yeah, he was the one who hyped it up, he helped Madison hype it up. That's right.
The other thing that's weird about Edmund Randolph, because part of the Virginia Plan, quote, a national government ought to be established consisting of a supreme legislative, judiciary, and executive. So he goes out there, he hypes it up. He's like, here we go. Virginia Plan. Let's go. Let's rock. Let's make a constitution. And then in September of 1787, he refused to sign the Constitution.
Yeah.
He's like, had a change of heart. And he was like, nah, son. I don't want anything to do with this. So he's an interesting character because my understanding is that it's because there wasn't a Bill of Rights. So yeah, I assume he wasn't like, the Virginia Plan is different from what ultimately happened. We know that there was a compromise.
Great compromise. Yes.
The Great Compromise, the Connecticut Compromise. So it's, there's probably logical consistency to it, but it is funny to me that he walks out there like a hype man. And at the end, he's like, nah, I'm out.
Yeah, I think he just thought that the Senate was too powerful, and I think I was wrong about.
I don't see him in here.
There's nothing about the Three-Fifths Compromise. I'm mixing him up with somebody else. But
the other thing that is interesting among a lot of the anti-federalists, and this is where I'm least interested in them, is that several of them that we're going to talk about, and Edmund Randolph is one of them. One of their main complaints is that the Constitutional Convention was the final document, basically. And, ultimately there was a plan to institute a Bill of Rights, but basically there's these procedural arguments about whether or not the Constitution should have gone to each of the states then to be amended, and then there would be another convention where they would incorporate the amendments, and then it would go to ratification. And I find that to be deeply uninteresting. It's like, why did you send representatives to a convention if you weren't going to let them actually convene? And so I think that's part of his procedural argument against the Constitution.
Sure. The other reason why I put him on this list is, he had quite a bit of leadership experience in the early republic. He was first Attorney General of Virginia, Governor of Virginia, first Attorney General for the United States federal government, and then second Secretary of State. Yeah. So, he was somebody who had those administrative skills, I think, that were pretty valuable in the early days to keep things running. He was only Secretary of State, though, for like a few months.
I have a quote here from the Virginia Ratifying Convention. If you'll indulge me, he says, when the plan, which is now before the General Assembly, that is the Virginia Ratifying Assembly, was on its passage through the convention, I moved that the state conventions should be at liberty to amend, and that a second general convention should be holden. AKA, he's saying, like, the reason I opposed this ratification, the reason I didn't sign it, is because I think we should just keep talking. So he was a proceduralist.
He was.
If you've ever had someone in your workplace who's like, instead of deciding something at this meeting, why don't we have a decision to have more meetings?
Oh,
he's that guy.
In the chat, they're saying C. They're saying C.
C.
Saying C. I put him as D, but
he's got to be a D because he didn't write the Virginia plan. He just read it out. And then he bailed on the Constitution. And his reason for it was procedural, which is the most annoying reason to oppose anything.
Well, I want to remind you that we're not just looking at the convention itself. We're thinking about, the first 2 or 3 decades of our country's history. So, I think that in terms of carrying out the law after the Constitution was passed, he was instrumental with that as well. But
you're going to hold me to standards, and I'm going to, no, that's fine. I'm just kidding. Of course. I think he's a D tier, especially I think he fits in with the other D, but that is looking like a lengthy list there.
Yeah.
So I guess my question for Chad is, are you voting C because C is looking lonely, or because you genuinely think he's more important than our D tier?
He was fired from Washington's administration. I believe that's true. Yeah, I'm going to put him at D. The more I think about it, I was thinking about putting him to C, but I think, don't worry. We have C's coming up. Don't worry.
The letter C will not be lonely.
All right. Edmund Randolph, D tier. Next up, we have, this guy, John. Another John, second president of the United States.
My boy.
The only person of all these founding fathers who has a miniseries on HBO, of course. Great show. It holds up really well. I actually went back and watched it recently, and I was like, yeah, this is still pretty good. Have you seen it?
I actually I was thinking of watching it before this because I'm embarrassed to say I've seen the Apple TV Franklin series and have not seen the HBO Adams series.
I've not seen the Franklin series. Yeah.
It's interesting.
All right.
I really like Adams. And so I won't say what tier yet, but let's just talk a little bit about him because so Adams is from New England, and he makes up this, what would later probably be called something like a middle class. And he really was afraid that bringing the country together was going to be deeply difficult. That when you looked at the middle class of New England and you compared them to like the gentry, like the people in Jefferson's world, the aristocracy of the South, that it would be hard to bring all these sections together. And his way of framing the American government, I think it's a work called Thoughts on Government. And it's about bringing together the one, the few, and the many. And by the one, he means the king or the executive power. The few, he means the aristocracy, the gentry of society, and the many, he means the democracy, the plebeians, the many, the people. And he thinks about bringing these groups together in a way that would be sustainable over time. And what's so interesting about Adams, in my opinion, is that there is this underlying cynicism about the whole thing. And when you contrast him with someone like Thomas Jefferson, who had lots of idealism in his writing,
yeah, they complemented each other well.
they complemented each other extremely well. They ended up being political rivals and then coming back to be friends later in life. They were such intense rivals. In fact, I think they died on the same day, July 4th, 1826, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And one of their last words was like, Adams still lives. Maybe that's Jefferson, or Adams' last words, or Jefferson still lives. I can't recall.
Yeah, Jefferson's last words. Yeah.
So these are polarizing opposites. And to be honest, I relate a lot more to Adams. I think he was correct that it's hard to hold this whole project together, and that human nature is a lot darker than we give it credit for.
Easier to say that now in 2025, isn't it?
It is, but we've had dark moments. I mean, if Adams would seem prescient in the Civil War era, he would seem prescient during the Mexican-American era, when Mexican-American War era in the 1850s, when, like, you know, we have these deep divisions over slavery. He would seem prescient even in you know, the 60s, when, you know, people like RFK, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Robert F. Kennedy, or I already said RFK, when these people were being assassinated, when there was violence, when there were church burnings and you know, lynchings,
Mm-hmm.
you know, Adams would look at all that and not be surprised. Whereas I think a lot of these founders had an idealism about them, particularly Jefferson, and they'd look and be like, oh, what's gone wrong here? And Adams would be like, what did you expect? On the flip side, to talk down Adams a little bit, you know, he did have some goofy opinions, right? Like, he did have seemingly a lot of affection for the British system. Part of that is a conspiracy by his rival Jefferson to play him up that way. But he did unironically propose calling the president His Majesty the President, or His High Mightiness the President. That's a bit weird.
Yeah, that was weird.
And as president of the United States, he was probably the worst president for free speech until Woodrow Wilson.
Yeah.
And so he was a strange little man, but I like him. What do you think?
I obviously kind of lean more towards Thomas Jefferson, ideologically, I guess, but the older I get, the more I appreciate John Adams. I mean, obviously he was kind of like the Thomas Hobbes American style, and Thomas Jefferson was the John Locke American style, like in terms of their core differences in terms of human nature itself and how much freedom should we actually have. The big question, how much power should government have? Obviously, Adams was more like, I think government should step in more. Jefferson's like, government should just back off. But Adams, I think, you know, more aligned with the Federalists. Once the Federalist Party got started, him and Alexander Hamilton, of course, got along well with that. But I think the weird thing about Adams that he always struggled with was, I don't think his interpersonal skills were that of Hamilton's. I think he struggled to communicate his ideas as compared to Jefferson in particular. And so I feel like he was always at that disadvantage. Like if he was trying to defend the Alien and Sedition Acts, if you look at anything that he said about, there's not much that I have ever seen about him talking about those laws, which I think are horrible. But I mean, like, it didn't seem like he did a very good job defending those laws. Whenever you're talking about, I mean, this is something, it's a very cultural, it's integral to our American culture, that idea of individualism and just self-sovereignty. That's something that's uniquely, I think, American compared to a lot of other countries. And I think Adams was still very deeply kind of, I think, more nostalgic for the old ways. But that doesn't mean like he wasn't a progressive dude. Like he also had progressive views in many ways, like very enlightened.
Some of the way that I think about it is like, was he so cynical because he saw the failings of power within himself?
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, he was so, you see that a lot in the show about him, how like he was his own worst enemy and always doubting himself. Something we have to mention, though, that we haven't mentioned, I can't believe we haven't said this before, but his diplomacy efforts were extremely important in terms of the early years of our country. Before he was a diplomat, he was in the Massachusetts government.
And he defended the Boston Massacre perpetrators. He was their defense attorney.
There you go.
Which I think is super admirable and principled.
He was. After, of course, he was the first vice president of the United States, in addition to being the second president. I just think that his influence was...
And he was part of the Committee of Five for the Declaration of Independence.
Yep, he was part of the Committee
actively
of Five.
Involved in the Second Constitutional Convention. And
even though he wasn't actually there, but he did.
Sorry, the Second Continental Congress. My apologies.
Oh, Second Continental Congress. Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned the Declaration of Independence. That like he was
there. He says that he says that when the Committee of Five met, because this Committee of Five included Franklin, Jefferson, Adams. One of the other people on this list is there too, but I forget. Anyway, there was, according to Adams, there was like, well, who's going to draft it? And according to Adams, he was like, you know what? I think Jefferson should do it. And he gave Jefferson like a little pat on the back. And no one else had that opinion. Like apparently Jefferson's retelling of the situation was that they went into a room and nobody volunteered. And so he was like, I'll do it. So there's this jealousy that Adams had of Jefferson being the author of the Declaration of Independence. And in fact, the May 15th preamble to a statement was written by Adams. And in any event, he often thought that his May 15th or perhaps a July 2nd writing would end up being the big thing that we celebrated. And the fact that it was the declaration written by Jefferson made him intensely jealous. So he's an interesting character because of his flaws.
It was Robert Livingston. Robert Livingston was on the Committee of Five.
Yeah.
Why didn't I put him on this? He should be higher than William Livingston. I think I forgot to put Robert Livingston on here because I was like, oh, we already have Livingston. I think we're good. And I forgot him. And also Roger Sherman, who we're going to get to here. Okay, we've been spending too much time on, sorry.
Well, here's where you're going to, where would you put him?
I'm leaning towards A, but then the more we talk about him, I was like, man, maybe he could be S tier. But no, I think A is pretty solid. What do you think?
I strongly believe that he's S tier.
Oh, okay.
For a couple reasons. One is writing in 1776, he's already putting together a structure that would look at least recognizable to the framers at the convention. So he's already talking about a balanced government. He's already talking about, veto power and a bicameral legislature.
He was one of the first to talk about 3 branches of government and checks and balances as well.
And then after the Constitution is written, he's writing about, and he's deeply involved in the Declaration. Then after the Constitution is written, he's writing things that would sound familiar to anyone who's read the Federalist Papers. So he's writing, power must be opposed to power, interest must be opposed to interest, trust nothing without being bound down by checks. So in my opinion, like he's predicting some of the issues of the American government in a very real way and using them to defend the Constitution, as opposed to just saying, oh, this is great. I think he is a better representation of America than Thomas Jefferson, or at least is an equal representative of America. He represents America's demons and looking itself in the eye in a way that Jefferson never could. So to me, if Jefferson, which we haven't discussed yet, is S tier, Adams must also be S tier. If Jefferson is A tier, then Adams must also be A tier. But considering that we probably will put Jefferson in the S tier, I don't know how we can not put Adams in the S tier.
Oh, wow. This is tough. A lot of people are saying B, actually.
Well, which is typical, right?
S.
It's typical, right? Because by like common understanding, Adams is B tier. By like, if you just stop someone on the street, they would be like, they would go with Jefferson,
I'm going to use my phone to start a poll because this is really close. I don't want to, I'm at least A, but A or S is the question. So I think I'm going to start a poll. I have to do it through my phone.
And you could say like, oh, Jefferson wasn't great on speech, right? Because of the Sedition Acts, right? But Adams wasn't great because of that, right? And it's like, well, okay. A lot of the founders had some pretty disturbing political opinions. One of the most obvious one for Jefferson is his treatment of his enslaved people, right? So You know, like the idea that these people are flawed, like that Adams was flawed, doesn't really work in my mind, because he also seemed to know it at some level, that he was flawed and that the system was flawed. That's what makes him compelling, in my opinion.
Okay. You know what? This is my stream. I'm going with A. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Because I can't put him in the same category as some of these other ones. Like, maybe
okay.
Thomas Jefferson should be A as well, though. We can have that discussion here in a moment. But
I also promised to make it interesting, so that's part of why I'm being so insistent. I'm not actually offended that he's in the A tier and not the S tier.
Okay.
Oh my gosh!
Recognize him?
Count Chocula.
No.
Great founder.
Elbridge Gerry.
Jerry.
Well, it's pronounced Gary back then, but his name got transformed to Jerry. But yeah, Elbridge Gerry of the great state of Massachusetts. What I had, I think I didn't have him very high. Yeah, I think I put him down at D tier. So the namesake of gerrymandering, because he was the one who was associated with when the state legislature in Massachusetts was trying to be obstructionist when they were trying to draw up districts. They had a district that looked like a salamander, and so a local newspaper said, what is this? Gerrymandering, combining his name with this salamander-looking district. And that's where that term comes from, is like where the politicians choose the voters instead of the voters choosing the politicians. You know,
that's something we all hate.
What's that?
That's a sick burn.
Oh, I mean, yeah, it's like that's kind of.
What are you, a salamander, bro?
Yeah,
I'd cry
back then. Oh yeah, I'm sure Elbridge Gerry cried a lot. But other than that, he was pretty influential New Englander. He was, let's see, I got to make sure I catch all of this. Of course, he was the vice president, was the highest office he ever held. I think he died in office. Yeah, he died when he was vice president with James Madison. Before that, governor of Massachusetts in the House of Representatives, representing Massachusetts, district of Massachusetts, member of the Congress of the Confederation, and the Continental Congress. So pretty good resume. However, in terms of like, okay, I'm looking back on my 4 requirements: influence, ideology, leadership, legacy. When we talk about legacy, influence, oftentimes it's just his name, you know, that's got attached to this bad practice of gerrymandering. What do you think about Elbridge Gerry?
Elbridge Gerry, or if he was from Latin America, it'd be Elbridge Gerry. Which I think is the correct pronunciation after all.
Yes,
clearly that's the right one. Yeah, I mean, so I do also have gerrymandering written down, and that he signed the Declaration and the Articles of Confederation, but he did not sign the Constitution. However, he was involved in the convention. He was involved in a committee that it produced some compromises. One of them was on like the big question about the Senate and the House, creating the bicameral legislature for representation, and then one for the states. But that ultimately the reason he bailed on the whole process was because of something very, very specific. And that is that my understanding of the American Constitution is that somewhere in there it says that spending bills must originate in the House. So if you're going to spend money, it must be done in the Appropriations Committee, presumably of the House of Representatives. The Senate can't initiate that process. And apparently that was something that Elbridge Gerry opposed with all of his heart and soul, and could not in good conscience allow the Senate to not be able to initiate money spending bills. So a very strange reason. Somebody's gonna have to fact check me there, but that's what I have for him as his like principled stand, and I find that a little bit bizarre. One thing in his favor is that he also took notes on the convention, and next to Madison, he's one of the only primary sources we have.
Yeah.
So that's cool.
That's one of the criticisms of Madison is like, oh, of course you're going to look good because you're the one who told the story.
Right.
Like, but it's verified with other sources. Like, I don't like that criticism.
Right. And I talked to the author of the book, The Lost Soul, of the American presidency who told me that, Madison's notes should be taken with a bit of a grain of salt. He was a partisan. He was a
Right.
politician after all. When he writes about Hamilton and kind of makes Hamilton out to be like this huge monarchist, that we should be a little bit careful. Yeah. But in general, Madison is the reason we know anything that happened at the Constitutional Convention. And no one would say that his notes are intended to mislead, only that we have to be careful. Elbridge Gerry is D tier.
It's Gary. Yeah, D tier, I think, is correct. I think we're gonna chat some of them are saying C.
To decide whether it's Jerry or Gary, we should create a district of voters that is extremely mal-shaped, that biases one of those two options, and then take a poll.
All right. Yes.
Who is that? Why do that's so familiar? Who is that?
It's James Monroe.
Is that Monroe? Okay.
Yeah. So James Monroe, I'm currently making a video about. Actually, I started editing it already, and I've been reading about him for, it seems like, forever now. I think the most popular president that most people haven't heard of, because when he was president, the 5th president, he was extremely popular. That's the era of good feelings, the so-called era of good feelings, when partisanship was hardly a thing. Kind of the opposite of today, really. But I think somebody who definitely was similar to Madison in terms of, and they were friends. They were both very pragmatic guys. They were not easy to put in a box in terms of their political views. But I think the more impressive thing about James Monroe, I know being president is pretty impressive, but before he was president, I mean, he did it all. He has arguably the most impressive resume of almost every other American in history. So let's just go. I want to make sure I catch all of it here. So in addition to being the 5th president of the United States, before that, he was the 7th U.S. Secretary of State. Before that, the 8th U.S. Secretary of War. During the War of 1812, he actually was both, because they had to fire one of the guys. Before that, Governor of Virginia, U.S. Minister to the UK, U.S. Minister to France, a senator representing Virginia in the Virginia House of Delegates, a delegate to the Congress of the Confederation. Not only that, he fought in the American Revolutionary War. He was an actual soldier. He got injured in the war, almost died, served under George Washington, but also Washington's cousin. Just like kind of an amazing guy that very few Americans know much about today.
Did he oppose the Constitution?
That's the thing. Okay, so he was hanging out in France and the UK during the 1780s. So we actually don't. He wasn't. There were not as many records about his thoughts about the Constitution during the whole process. But there's a lot of assumptions made that he had very similar views to James Madison and Thomas Jefferson, that he was mostly an anti-federalist, but then came around after a Bill of Rights was added.
I have a 1788, June 10th, James Monroe, Virginia ratifying convention. And he's writing, there's a distinction between this government and ancient and modern ones. A division of power in ancient governments, or in any government at present, was founded on different principles from those of this government. What was the object of power? Blah, blah, blah. 3 branches, which enables it to effectively defend. So he seems to be a little all over the place. Sorry, I had that linked for myself to open. Because I have here that he opposed it for the fact that it was so centralizing, that it was missing a Bill of Rights. And he was upset that according to the Miller Center, which is one of the things I was reading earlier, that he wanted there to be direct election of senators rather than the states choosing the senators directly. So it's kind of interesting because he seems to be more of a Democrat than a lot of the founders, as in he wanted more democracy in the system. Mm-hmm. But that also seemed to extend to the fact that he wanted there to be less power overall centralized in that ultimately democratized system. So I wouldn't say it's contradictory. It's just unique.
But in terms of influence, I feel like he was a little late to the party. The ideas were already set in motion. And so that's why he kind of goes down to me. I would say he's more of a B tier because, his resume, like I said, is impressive, but his influence and legacy, I don't know, and ideology really kind of are not as impressive. His leadership, yeah,
hard to read. Yeah.
So, chat, what do you think? Should he be? I mean, I can see. I mean, clearly as a president, even though also I should say that I almost didn't add him to this list. I was like, oh, is he even considered a founding father? Because he was pretty young during the Revolution. He actually dropped out of college when he
studied under Jefferson. That's how young he was.
Yeah, when he was 17 or 18, he dropped out of college to fight as a soldier.
Which, by the way, we were talking earlier about what Thomas Paine was up to. He was such an agitator that one of the things that he did was become a pamphleteer in France during the French Revolution. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because that got him arrested, and Monroe was the person who helped him get out of jail in France. Anyway, B or C for me. I'm leaning towards C, but if you say B, I'm willing to go with it.
That's what both I've seen in the chat, B and C.
But if he wasn't a president, I would say hard C. The fact that he, did all of these things, he was in cabinets, he was in the Continental Congress, he was in the war, he was the president.
A lot of people mention in the Monroe Doctrine, in which he didn't really write that. That was John Quincy Adams, but but yeah, okay, I'm going to put him at B, I think. Yeah. Where are you at?
Could you talk more about that?
I think the fact that I lean heavily on his resume.
Oh no, I meant the Monroe Doctrine.
Oh, the Monroe Doctrine, just the fact that okay, so what it is. Sorry, Monroe Doctrine was I don't know if he actually spoke.
It was like a letter to the world.
It might have been like either a letter to Congress or a speech or both to Congress. I'm not sure if he read it out loud, but the words were delivered to Congress, and it said that, yes, the message got out to the world that we should make it a priority. The United States should make it a priority to block influence from Europe, because Europe at that time was still heavily colonized the Americas, and actually it was you saw a lot of in Latin America. You saw a lot of similar movements to what happened in the United States, where you had revolutions where they broke away from their colonial masters, and Monroe just made it clear, hey, we support that, and you need to back off Europe, back off of the Americas and the entire Western Hemisphere.
And what happens is that a couple progressive presidents at the turn of the 20th century, Teddy Roosevelt, well, after the turn of the 20th century, Teddy Roosevelt, later Woodrow Wilson, would upend this whole principle, because Roosevelt wanted to have a big, great white fleet of American naval power, wanted to build an empire in places like, the Philippines, for example, that were taken from Spain after that war. And then you had Wilson, who involved himself in creating the plan, the Treaty of Versailles after World War I, wanted foreign policy to be run based on morals and democracy. It wanted to engineer a League of Nations. And so that took hold over the last 100 years. And the reason I'm rambling on about this is because we are experiencing at the moment what appears to be a bit of a neo-Monroe Doctrine reasserting itself through this new administration. Actually, another Elbridge Colby, who was, I think, Assistant Secretary of State now in the second Trump administration, is an influential thinker in reviving the idea that our main preoccupation as a country should be this Western Hemisphere, and we shouldn't be worried about what's going on in Europe, or even perhaps what's going on in Asia, in places like the Taiwan Strait. And so that when you hear about, in the news about bombing boats that are potentially carrying drugs off the coast of Venezuela, you should think about this discussion right now with the Monroe Doctrine, because in a way, bombing Venezuelan drug boats is a way of enacting the Monroe Doctrine in saying that, like, this hemisphere is our place to be a hegemon, and to wield our influence, even though it's not what the original idea of the Monroe Doctrine was.
Right.
But still, it's based on, it's a conversation we're having with James Monroe and John Quincy Adams all these years later.
Yeah. 5'6". This wig is getting really itchy. I don't know if I can make it the whole.
Take it off.
Next up, we got this lovely gentleman. Do you know who this is?
Is that George Clinton?
Oh, that's a good guess, actually. No, this is Robert Morris. Robert Morris Jr. He was a senator representing the great state of Pennsylvania.
All right, Pennsylvania.
And he did some administrative stuff before that, but also a delegate to the Second Continental Congress in Pennsylvania in the 1770s. What I have in my notes,
finance.
Yeah, he was really good with money. That was one. So so the things I have down in my notes, one of only two people to sign the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, and the U.S. Constitution. The other being Roger Sherman. So that's a notable thing about him. Also, he was a rich guy, so a big financier of the Revolution. The colonies, the colonial government didn't have much money during the Revolution, famously, where they were just kind of creating money and there was extreme inflation. But he financed much of it. He was a big reason why there was a victory at Yorktown. And finally, a big reason why there was a national bank later on. So I know Alexander Hamilton gets all the credit for that, but it wasn't just Hamilton.
It wasn't. In fact, I have a quote here from a letter that he wrote to Hamilton. He had read one of Hamilton's finance plans in 1781. He said, "I have read it," that being Hamilton's plan, "with that attention which it justly deserves, and finding many points of it to coincide with my own opinions on the subject. It naturally strengthened the confidence which every man ought to possess a certain degree in his own judgment," blah, blah, blah. That was May 26, 1781. So these two were exchanging on national finance, which will also tell you why Robert Morris was someone who was heavily criticized in his time as well, because people from the South were heavily, heavily suspicious of quote unquote northern finance. I know today we don't think of Pennsylvania necessarily as like northern, but in this time, like the idea of northern finance, of people like Robert Morris and Hamilton with their big conspiring, non-virtuous ways of having debt that don't relate to actual like physical land, were treated with lots of suspicion, even though there's a decent argument to be made. And I just recently was listening to something where this was explicated at length. It was so fascinating. I was trying to find it before this and I just couldn't figure out where I'd heard it. But anyway, Morris was treated with a lot of condemnation while he was doing his very best, is the basic line. Like he was the superintendent of finance. He was, trying to keep it all together and get the states to pay their money. And a lot of people were basically slapping him in the face. And there were times where, his impact was quite important. And anyway, one of his bigger impacts that would, carry on through Hamilton was the idea that like the Articles of Confederation, there was a sense from the very beginning it wasn't going to work because you couldn't force the states to participate in anything. And so, that had a big impact later on when the Constitution was drafted. And in fact, the Congress was able to spend money and levy taxes.
Absolutely. I think he's at least a C, but chat, what do you think? Let us know. What do you think, Will?
I was leaning B just because I think we might have not been independent if he hadn't shoved his cash and held the finances together. But C's also fine because, did he draft the Constitution or did he do anything much after that?
Yeah.
No. Do people know him today? Does he have a lasting influence? Do people go, "Oh, Robert Morris, of course, my boy"?
I'm seeing A, B, or C. I think, you've convinced me. I think let's go ahead and go B for Mr. Morris. Up there with James Monroe. It's kind of weird.
Did you write this? We have some shared notes, some of it, but personally leveraged his credit to keep the Continental Army funded at Yorktown, for example, critical.
Yeah, Yorktown. That's the more I think about it, it's like the fact that he really was a big reason why there was an American victory at Yorktown makes me think that maybe he should be a B tier. It's kind of weird to have somebody like him that far up, but.
Well, hidden hand. We should mention that his mercantile firm did engage in the slave trade.
Yes.
So anyway,
All right. Let's add to the stage here this person.
Benedict Cumberbatch. Yep, there he is.
Oh gosh, who is this? I see some of these people look the same. Is this Daniel Carroll, I think? Yeah.
Oh.
Daniel Carroll. Do you know anything about Daniel Carroll?
No, I didn't before I Googled it. I know that he was a Roman Catholic founder. I learned that.
Maryland. Yeah.
And that he was a delegate to the Philadelphia Convention in 1787, the Constitutional Convention.
Yep.
One of the things that I think stuck out to me were twofold. One is that he owned a lot of the land that became the District of Columbia. So he was part of what made it possible for the District of Columbia to be the seat of the federal government. Washington assigned him to come here.
Yeah.
That's where I am. And part of the land that became the District of Columbia from the Maryland side was Daniel Carroll's. I didn't know that until I started doing this research, so I learned something. Also, I think this is interesting in our times, is that Carroll wrote and said and argued in favor of the Constitution because of freedom of conscience, because of the idea that it would protect freedom of expression. The rights of conscience are, he wrote, in their nature of particular delicacy, and will little bear the gentlest touch of government hand. So the idea being, he said that in 1789 in the American House of Representatives while the Bill of Rights was being debated. So he was somebody who said, like, maybe someone like me who is a Roman Catholic, and people have to know who are watching this, that it really wasn't until the late 1900s when it became pretty normal and like not a non-issue for someone to be Catholic in American politics. We had Al Smith who ran, and people literally ran against him, calling him a papist, right? And there was concerns even when Kennedy ran, like, what if Kennedy is actually serving the Roman Catholic Church and not the American people? So this is someone early on, really early on, earlier than I ever knew before I started looking up for this live stream, that was saying, like, hey, this Constitution protects me as a, minority group that is often considered to be bad. So I think he's really interesting. And if anybody's watching this, they should tweet at the FIRE org, basically the ACLU of the First Amendment, and ask them if they've ever heard of Daniel Carroll before. I don't, but again, like, in terms of his influence, unfortunately, he's a D tier.
Okay. I had him as
what do you think?
Tier.
Have a C?
I think he's the most prominent Roman Catholic founding father. He was also one of 5 men to sign both the Articles of Confederation and the Constitution. He was a representative in the very first Congress representing Maryland. I don't know. I guess I can go back and forth.
Let the people decide. This is a democracy.
C or D.
This isn't the Senate. This is the House of Representatives. Let the people decide.
That's right.
The original.
Well, they're saying C or D, or C is for Catholic, Andrea says. John Jay would have hated him. I don't know if John Jay actually did hate him. Oh, yeah, John Jay was kind of bigoted, right, about religious stuff. I don't know.
Well, I'm learning something else today. I didn't know that about John Jay.
I confuse a lot of this information in my head when... okay, where's A from Maryland? No, stop playing that. Either C or D. Come on now, for Daniel Carroll.
If he had designed the Maryland flag, I'd put him in the S tier, because that's the most banging state flag.
I see more C's than D's, so I'm going with C.
We need a C anyway. I know that earlier I said we shouldn't
we
just
don't have
put
a
people
C.
in C.
Yeah.
Welcome, Daniel Carroll. Catholic Carroll gets to be a C.
Now I just have to find him. There he is. Okay.
Where is that papist? There he is.
Next up, we have somebody. I don't know who this guy is.
Who could it be?
Yeah, our boy Benjamin Franklin. I used to dress up as Benjamin Franklin during these reenactments, and I think I was in for Halloween, multiple Halloweens. I mean, what is there to say that has not been said before? It's one of our most beloved founding fathers, most people say.
Yeah. I wrote down more notes for Benjamin Franklin than any of the other founders that we're covering today.
Okay.
I really went to town writing down stuff.
Well, don't get too carried away. I got to pick up my daughter from tennis practice, so
Okay. I won't get too carried away. All I'll say is that he was this fun character who helped America get assistance. He wore the coon skin hat or whatever around. He wrote an early thought on the working sort of industrious pull yourself up by your bootstrap attitude that would come to characterize the American middle class. He went to the Constitutional Convention and was suspected of not being super duper loyal because he had been in Europe this whole time, but eventually became one of the most vocal advocates for the Constitution, excuse me, I've got this mixed up, the Second Continental Congress. So when he came and said, I want to support independence, people didn't know if he was a spy or not because he had been over in Europe. And it turned out, no, he was one of the most vociferous defendants of independence. I don't know. What else would you add for him?
It's interesting because he actually didn't have that much experience like in government. I mean, he was president of Pennsylvania in the 1780s, had a lot of diplomacy experience like during the Revolution. Randomly, kind of to me, a postmaster general. Like when I read that, I'm like, okay, what? He was all, I mean, I guess in Pennsylvania government, he played a little bit more of a role, but still, like, I think he was more known as somebody just as an influencer. I know we didn't use that term back then in the 1770s, 1780s, but he was somebody that people listened to as a journalist, as somebody who put out a lot of propaganda.
The Edict of the King of Prussia was one of his satirical pieces that basically made it sound like the King of Prussia was trying to tax the people of Britain. And by doing that, it was a spoof on the people of Britain taxing Americans, or, imposing import taxes as though the colonies were not part of the British Empire. He also wrote rules by which to make a big empire a small empire, I think was the title, or something very close to that, which was, again, it was like a parody. He was like, hey, if you want your empire to be small, make your colonists quarter troops and make sure the troops are super rude. So it was obviously a joke to say that, Britain, it was in Britain's self-interest to not be so hard on the colonies. Another thing that is interesting about Franklin is that when Thomas Jefferson wrote, "We hold these truths to be sacred and undeniable," Franklin crossed out that phrase and said, "We hold these truths to be self-evident." And the reason he was doing that is because sacred and undeniable has a ring of, let's say, faith-based reasoning, which is not unheard of in the American founding. But these were men who were reading things like David Hume, who would want to pursue rational truth and not one based in faith. And so self-evident was a phrasing that was in more comportment with this utilitarian Renaissance, enlightened society.
Very much a man of the Enlightenment, like kind of portrayed himself that way. But I think I talked about his propaganda. I mean, what was something that was the most consistent thing, because he did spread around a lot of fake news, as it turns out. But the thing that was not fake, that he really believed in truly, was there should be complete and utter colonial unity against Britain. So he was, I think, more than any other person, arguably united the colonies against Britain. The only other person competing with that is probably Thomas Paine. And he even has the nickname, I believe it's, the first American. Because like you referenced this earlier, how I know a lot of what we think about Benjamin Franklin was kind of created because of his own media machine that he had created. So I think there's a lot of misconceptions about him. But I think what we know for sure is that he's somebody who is like truly representative of American culture at the time of colonial America, like to kind of contrast with your typical British culture of the time. Like he represented this whole new thing that was like that people could rally around. Like, yeah, we're different. We're not we have much more in common with what he's saying than what the king is saying, if that makes sense.
And he was an early advocate of a potential rival, to your point, like a potential rival parliament. that would be loyal to the king, but not would be like on the same level as the Westminster Parliament. So he was like an early advocate of something that would give, like, even before independence, he was like, the equivalent today would be like how the Australian and the Canadian governments are equal parliaments to the Westminster Parliament and pledge allegiance as independent, well, not colonies or commonwealths anymore, but as independent countries to the King of England. So anyway, one last thing. I know we don't want to go on too long. He was opposed to slavery, though his family did own some slaves. And even after the Constitution was ratified, he was involved in a petition for the abolition of slavery. And he asked that the Congress devise means for removing this inconsistency from the character of the American people.
Albany Plan. Thanks for mentioning that as well. Following Vega.
Yep. That's the one with the separate parliament.
Is he going to be S tier or A tier is the question, chat. Will, what do you think? I got him as, I think he's an A to me, which is still really good. Like I would put like Jefferson. Well, sorry, I don't want to list all of the ones yet, but there's only a select few that I really feel like get to be S tier. I'm thinking S tier, and it looks like most of the chat's agreeing. So, okay, I think we're gonna do that. Yeah, I think that's valid. All right, cool. Okay, now we got to move through some of these other more obscure ones more quickly because we have 30 minutes. Okay. Okay, this is George Clinton. Okay. Okay. Now, no, not that George Clinton. This George Clinton. That's a long-running joke on my channel. Not the funk singer. Anyway, so just a rundown about George Clinton. He was, of course, a vice president. He was a vice president under multiple presidents, Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. Strong anti-federalist, strong Democratic Republican, governor of New York. I think just somebody who was highly influential in his state of New York. And I think wasn't necessarily the deepest of thinkers, but I think when he spoke, people listened, type of deal. What do you think? Yeah. Well, I mean, so you said everything important except for one thing, which is that he supposedly wrote the Cato essays. And okay, what were those again? Cato were anti-federalist essays, and actually, the anti-federalists, the anti-federalist Cato essays. So I've got my undergrad copy of the anti-federalist papers right here. So I won't dwell on it because you said we're running out of time. But I will just say that if he is the author of the Cato essays, then your analysis of him not being intellectual is incorrect. But if he isn't, then you are correct. But so the number one that I always reference, and the last time we talked, and probably the time before that I referenced, is Cato 5, where he warns about the great powers of the presidency leading to ruin. And he warns us that if you pass the Constitution, you're naive, because can you not fathom that an American can be a tyrant? And I do think that was quite prescient. He also, in Cato 3, wrote that the government that was formed by the Constitution can never form a perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to you and your posterity. So if he wrote the Cato essays, he's an iconic critic of the Constitution in a way that I think was prescient. Just a quick search, and it looks like there's only one historian that says he was the author. So I don't know. Yeah. So chat, who wrote the Cato essays? What did Google say who was the actual author? Or does no one know? Herbert Storing was the historian who said that George Clinton was Cato, one of the pseudonyms of some of the anti-federalist essays. Well, I can see that, I guess, but I'd never heard this before. So let's go with what you think, which is D tier then. Well, he would definitely be bumped up we could put C tier.
Well, we don't know. So how about we dedicate ourselves to learning the truth and after this and just
All right. Well,
put him where he most likely belongs.
but also a vice president for
Yeah.
under 2 administrations. So
Yeah.
okay. Next up, we have Daniel. Wait, who's this? Is this Dan? No, not
We already
Daniel.
did there, Daniel.
Yeah, no, that's not Daniel. That's William Patterson of New Jersey. He was at the Constitutional Convention. He was. Let's see here. I gotta get my notes. Make sure I get all this right. William Patterson was the author of the New Jersey Plan. He later served on the Supreme Court as well. So, New Jersey Plan, that was the one that said every state should have equal representation in Congress.
So that led to the Connecticut Compromise eventually. That created a bicameral legislature, one for representing the big populous states and one for just the states alone. Eventually would have been the Constitution, so that this, even though it does technically still represent states, they're directly elected senators. I don't have any other biographical details than you do, and so for that reason, I'd say he's C or D.
I would put him as C tier. Yeah, because the New Jersey Plan was a big deal.
Yeah, it stood opposite Madison's Virginia Plan and eventually led to compromise. So
yeah,
and in theory, Article 1 of the Constitution is the most important. I know today we think of Article 2 and the president is more important, but it's not. It's Article 1.
It is supposed to be.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we're going to Pinckney.
Oh my gosh.
Why do you say that?
Oh, it's just he's not a very flattering thing there.
Oh, Charles Pinckney. He was somebody who was at the Constitutional Convention, another one representing the great state of South Carolina. He helped shape early Southern federalism, served as governor of South Carolina, and also was in Congress. But he's one of those I didn't know much about until very recently. Yeah, and I joked earlier, like I didn't know who he was, or like I mixed him up with his distant relative, Charles Cotesworth Pinckney, who ran for president. And it was somebody who served as a general in the American Revolution. So yeah, do you know much about Charles Pinckney?
I don't, but when I was researching, one of the things that stuck out, we don't need to dwell since we're running low on time, but I'll just say that the things that stuck out to me when reading about him was that he was interested in a strong national government, but again, was all about being pro-slavery. So is that special brand of like the opposite of what you would expect. You'd expect someone who's very pro-slavery to be opposed to a strong national government, so it can't interfere with that institution. And he wasn't one of those. But that's all I got really. The Pinckney Plan came up, but yeah, I have to pledge ignorance here. In fact, I had to open my phone just to remember what I marked down for myself.
If that's the case, then I think again we have to go to D tier.
It's getting full down there.
I was thinking about putting him at C tier because it just seems like Southerners don't get the same amount of love for founding fathers. But
I mean, Madison and Jefferson and Washington.
I always think of them as like mid-Atlantic or like kind of. But yeah, they were Southerners. Yeah, they were slave owners. So I get it. Yeah. Okay, so next up. We have, this would be Oliver Ellsworth, who I think he needs to be at least a C tier. He was somebody who was, I think, fairly influential at the Constitutional Convention. He, I think, basically invented the court system he was the main author of the Judiciary Act of 1789. He also co-authored the Connecticut Compromise with Roger Sherman, which aka now known as the Great Compromise. In terms of his resume, it's also very impressive. Obviously, he was in the Supreme Court as a Chief Justice from 1796 to 1800. Before that, a U.S. Senator for Connecticut, his home state. I guess that was it for positions, but I just think at the convention itself was pretty influential there.
Yeah. two branches of involved in basically the formation of two branches of the federal government. And one of them not being the presidency is actually makes him higher up in my brain. Connecticut Compromise, co-authored, and like you mentioned, the Judiciary Act. Defended the Constitution and the Landholder Essays and wrote something that I thought was pretty interesting. He also was active in debates. Madison had him a lot, like in his notes on the convention. Anyway, the Landholder Essays I was looking through. I was reading through the Landholder Essays. I only got to like Landholder 5, but Landholder 3 gave me this quote that I thought was worth bringing to the live stream, which is he wrote, "Liberty is a word which, according as it is used, comprehends the most good and the most evil of any in the world. ... Internal government of strength is the only means of repressing both external violence and preserving the national rights of the people against the injustice of their own brethren." So he's saying that we need a strong national government because we have external and internal threats. That would be echoed then in the pledge that the president takes later on about defending against foes, both foreign and domestic, or whatever the exact phrasing is. I think Connecticut plan in and of itself with Roger Sherman should put him at like a B or C tier, along with two branches of government he was involved with. So
I think still C tier is what I'm going to put him with, because I think he was somebody who, other than the convention itself, didn't have a lot of influence. And Judiciary Act, the Judiciary Act, though, you're right. Supreme Court, he did have a lot of influence.
But you're right to put, like, it's basically like he shows up at the convention and then disappears, rides off into the sunset.
After the Judiciary Act, yeah.
Then he rides off in the sunset, and then he turns around his horse and comes back. Judiciary Act, and then rides off into the sunset again.
Okay, do you know who this guy is?
That is the Ghost of Christmas Present.
No, this is John Witherspoon.
Dang it.
John Witherspoon, I never would have known much about if not for reading about him in multiple books when I was researching for my Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and James Monroe videos, because he just kept coming up. But mostly with James Madison. Apparently this guy, he was a teacher.
And a minister?
Minister. Extremely influential at Princeton. He was, so let me get this pulled up. All right. Okay. So Madison, the Reverend John Witherspoon, the sixth president of Princeton University. He taught many future founding fathers. His ideas were extremely influential. So he was like, I consider him and his ideology the most significant part of his legacy, actually. A Presbyterian minister. So let's see here if I can find a list of all the students that he. Oh, here it is. Okay, so he helped influence the ideas of not only James Madison but also Aaron Burr, William Bradford, Hugh Henry Brackenridge. Among his students, 37 of them became judges, 3 of whom became U.S. Supreme Court justices. 10 of his students later served in the cabinet. 12 of his students became members of the Continental Congress. 28 would go on to become U.S. senators, and 49 became U.S. representatives. So that's why I added him on here.
The other thing that I think makes him interesting is that he seems to be, and I also was just learning about him, but he seems to be both a Democrat at heart, as in democracy is good, but also only if the people themselves are extremely moral and like virtuous. And so that's like the combination of his like lawyerly and Presbyterian dispositions. Mm-hmm. So on democracy, he writes, "The multitude collectively always are true in intention to the interest of the public because it is their own. They are the public." AKA, like, democracy can't be wrong. But then on the same time, he writes, "Corruption of manners makes a public ripe for destruction." So my cat is causing trouble. Anyway, yeah, so it's like we all need to be perfectly virtuous. We need to have good manners and be moral. And if we do all that, then democracy is true. A very interesting guy. C? D? C?
I put him down as B.
OB, okay.
Just because like he influenced so many other founding fathers, you know, like his ideas, a lot of his Enlightenment ideas.
Right. It's like Socrates and then, Plato, Aristotle.
Yeah, like republicanism. Pretty big. I mean, like you think about it, a lot of times young people are influenced by these ideas that they hear as teenagers or in their 20s, and then like imagine our country without them. So that's why.
He also, last thing, Gordon S. Wood wrote of him, and I have Gordon S. Wood's book right here, The Creation of the American Creation of the American Republic, 1776 to 1787. He writes that Witherspoon did not like Paine's optimistic view of human nature. So he was against the idealism of someone like Paine. And Paine had written things like, reason like time will make its own way. Prejudice will fall in combat with interest. So he had like this idealized version. And apparently Witherspoon had a much more, what you'd expect from like a stern Presbyterian minister or, lawyer who's like, no. Like, we have to be careful about human nature. It's not so great.
Sure. All right. So this is James Wilson. James Wilson was a prominent voice at the Constitutional Convention, later served on the Supreme Court. He was also somebody who spoke a lot at the convention. He spoke more than any other person, I believe. Maybe nope,
second only to Madison.
Him and Gouverneur Morris, Gouverneur Morris and him were the two leading speakers. So pretty influential there. Let's see, what else did I have in my notes?
3/5 compromise is what I have him down for, language, which he defended in pragmatic terms.
So he was the other one that that's who I was mixing it up with. So big legal brain behind the Constitution, had major ideas on popular sovereignty. So his influence was mostly with with other founding fathers, not as much on the general public.
Yeah. And he wrote, so he did give a theory on reserve powers in defense of the Constitution. Like the critics, the anti-federalists were saying, there are powers that the federal government might have that are not explicit here in the Constitution. And Wilson was one of those saying, no, don't worry about it. Like there's reserve powers for the states. That's one of the reasons we have the 10th Amendment that explicitly says there are those reserve powers.
Big freaking deal. Okay. What do you think? Where should we put Mr. James Wilson on this list? Chat? I had him down as... I had him down as B tier, actually.
B? Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. Is that too high?
Well, then I'm going with C, because that's where I was trying to decide between C or D. So...
Oh, okay. Well, then...
I mean, like, ultimately, it's like what... he gave some speeches, and he involved himself in a little bit of the writing, but then...
I think C tier's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, moving right along. Now we've got somebody I think is the most underrated founding father, along with George Mason, and that is Roger Sherman, author of the Connecticut Compromise, which we now know as the Great Compromise, which combined the New Jersey plan of Patterson and the Virginia plan of Madison that gave us the two houses of Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate. The Senate, of course, represents each state. Each person in the Senate represents their entire state. Each person in the House of Representatives represents a district in their state. Based on population is how you figure out how many representatives you have in a state. Genius idea. I think it's one of the things that saved the convention when so many of the founding fathers were like not getting along very well. Like you knew that tensions were high, that this is maybe not going to work out. And then boom, Roger Sherman steps up. Okay. And there's something else about Roger Sherman. Not only did he help negotiate the Great Compromise, he's the only person to sign all 4 major founding documents. And he's the person that earlier I mentioned. Let's just bring it up here. I mentioned this at the very beginning of the stream. So of the 1,969 men who have participated in the 6 key assemblages of our nation's founding, he was the only one who did all 6. Roger freaking Sherman.
Helped draft the Bill of Rights too, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, yeah.
Was that
he assisted James Madison a little bit? Yeah. Yep.
And you're right. Madison says that he was the great compromiser of the convention. That's not a quote from Madison, but that's how he's portrayed in Madison's notes. It's like when everybody was ready to walk out, he was there. And I won't tread on your toes or repeat because I know that we don't have time for that. But I will just say that one of the things that stuck out to me is that he was such a peacemaker that he also seemed to believe that other people could be peacemakers too. I have this quote from him regarding the presidency saying that there will be no great struggle between the branches of government in the future because all the branches will be, quote, directed to one end, the advancement of the public good. And it almost makes me think like he was such a compromiser that he thought everyone else was going to be as acting in such good faith as him, when we clearly know that all the branches of government fight like crazy, or at least they should.
Idealistic, yeah.
Yeah.
Naive.
Where do you got him? A, B?
I went back and forth between A and B. I figured you could sway me, but also we got to mention that he was in both the Senate and the House of Representatives and the Confederation Congress as well. Chat seems to think either A or B.
I mean,
it's like at least B.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Morris case where it's like, would we have won at Yorktown without his money, right? It's like, would we have gotten a constitution without Sherman?
Right.
So I'd go with B, but A would be valid as well.
Okay. Well, somebody said S. So based on that, I'm going to put A then. I think.
All right.
I guess. Yeah, let's do it. All right. Roger.
How are we doing on time?
Oh, we'll see. We better speed up. Yeah, we'll go fast.
Okay.
Okay. So next up, we've got Samuel Adams, not the beer, but the man. The beer's named after the brewery. Samuel Adams was one of the early adopters of the revolution and the United States becoming its own country. So he may have kind of faded from the scene later on. But Samuel Adams, of course, based out of Boston, a very strong voice in Massachusetts, early revolutionary agitator. Some say to a point where he was like maybe a little bit too much of an agitator, like he incited violence, helped stir rebellion in Boston. He this is a big one. He founded the Committees of Correspondence. That said, less influential after the revolution began. But as far as getting the revolution started, I think a big freaking deal. And that's why I have him at least at B tier. What do you think?
And in 1772, he wrote that colonists should have a right to life, second to liberty, thirdly to property, together with the right to support and defend them in the best manner they can. That will strike as anyone as familiar because of the language in the Declaration of Independence. And if you know your political theory, you know this comes from the intellectual tradition of John Locke. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, interesting that you would bring up what I would say as well, which is that he's super influential and then disappears. So for that reason, I'd put him a little bit lower, maybe C. But interesting guy.
B for beer.
B for beer. Hooray, beer.
So B or C, chat. What do we think? I actually had him down as B, just because I feel like it took more courage to be one of those first few that spoke out against Britain when it was more, when they knew that, like you could be risking your future, right, your financial future, your political future, your just everything, your whole, like giving up everything because you're talking trash about Britain and openly. Like it was not like he was like doing this in hiding or anything. There's a lot of B's in the chat. Well, I guess, okay, fine. B for beer it is. Samuel Adams is B tier.
We're so strict on the criteria. Now we're just like, whatever.
Yeah. This guy, Thomas Jefferson. I'll let you go first, but we'll give you a couple minutes.
Well, I don't want to take up all the time. Jefferson. Oh gosh, the thing about Thomas Jefferson is that he is the heart. For all of his flaws, he is the best rhetorical heart of what it is to be an American.
Keyword rhetorical, yes. His words
are what we consider to be America today. The
his words aged pretty well overall. Yeah,
they did. We when we think of him, we think of sorry, my cat's right here trying to eat a plant. The Declaration of Independence, which we already talked about Locke, so I won't repeat that. But Those sentiments are the optimism that gets repeated by everyone of our presidents, basically without fail. And that is why he is an S tier person. But there are other reasons to consider him to be super interesting. One of which is that even though he was of the aristocracy, he had a lot of deep suspicions of aristocracy as it was currently constituted. He thought that there should be a meritocratic aristocracy, that is to say, like people who are actually naturally good at being leaders should be leaders. So that kind of was a good intellectual predecessor for like Woodrow Wilson, who wrote that, you know, people who are good at rhetoric should be the leaders of the country. He was involved in the, you know, opposing Hamilton in Washington's cabinet, part of that team of rivals, helped to influence where the federal government would be, like physically speaking. And gosh, there's a lot. So I don't want to just keep going on and on. But I will just add that he has his complications because of his way of treating his enslaved people, the Sally Hemings stuff. And of course, as president, he didn't quite live up to his ideals, even in that space either.
Not at all. Yeah.
But he did, you know, purchase the Louisiana Territory. I mean,
Yep.
he's S tier, but not without controversy, which I think your video does a great job of portraying.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. We should mention that he was the third president. Before that, he was vice president, awkwardly with his frenemy, John Adams. He was the primary author of the Declaration of Independence. Like you said, he was a governor of Virginia, although not necessarily a very good one. More known for being such a great influencer with his writings. I think an eloquent writer, but also somebody, if you look at his writings, I didn't realize this until recently, is like a lot of his stuff holds up really well, not just because the ideas are good, but because you can understand them.
Yeah.
Like to read a letter from Thomas Jefferson from the 1790s and understand most of it is quite remarkable. When a lot of men back then, you can't understand much of what they're saying. It doesn't translate very well to contemporary language.
He was pretty naive when it came to revolutions, you know, like his opinions on like the French Revolution didn't age like fine wine, you know, and he obviously became complicated when it comes to like the Haitian Revolution, because it's like a French-ish revolution. It actually predates the French Revolution, but lo and behold, it was black people doing their own liberation, in which case Jefferson's like, his brain starts smoking and sparking because he's like, how do I, what? You know, so complicated guy, but S tier.
You think S tier? Okay. I think chat might even disagree with that, believe it or not, but I put down S tier as well, so I think we probably ought to, yeah.
He could be down there with the A's and Adams.
I know you said he should be the same level as John Adams. Yeah, that's what kind of threw me off a little bit.
Well, yeah, I think because of just, if we're talking about who is the most influential American, he is the most influential American to have ever lived.
Other than George Washington, come on.
Intellectually, though, I mean, people don't quote George Washington; they quote Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah, that's true. That line, "All men are created equal,"
right? As opposed to Washington being like, "Charge," whatever. Like nobody quotes him, right?
Fair enough. All right, we got. Oh gosh, now I gotta look up who this is.
This is Gonzo from the Muppets.
No.
This is.
Oh gosh, my brain is getting tired. This is John Dickinson. John Dickinson. We can be quick on this one.
Yeah.
I had. Where's my?
He wrote that he supported the Constitution because of the promise of the Bill of Rights.
Oh yeah, he's actually a pretty big deal. So he wrote Letters from a Farmer in Pennsylvania, early advocate of colonial rights, so an early influencer similar to Samuel Adams. He opposed independence initially, but changed his mind, and then because of that was more influential, contributed to the Articles of Confederation, the Olive Branch Petition, that last-ditch effort to try to like heal relations with Britain, both the Articles and Constitutional Convention, one of the first to speak out against Britain. And I think one of the reasons why he spoke out was because he was another, similar to Morris, Robert Morris. He was very wealthy, and he's like, you know, he kind of was like, I do what I want because I can afford it. Oh, what are you holding up there?
Oh, it's still Gordon S. Wood's book, which, if you want my subtle opinion on Gordon S. Wood, that's for another time. But I did find a quote from Dickinson in this book. Government must never be lodged in a single body, aka we need separation of powers.
Lovely.
D.
I think he's at least actually I put him down as a B, I think, because I remember this is one of the rabbit holes I went down. I was like, whoa, this John Dickinson guy, he's kind of a big deal.
If once Parliament may impose duties to be paid in America without our consent, they may impose the largest duties and thus levy upon us such sums as they please. I saw that leverage duties without consent and wondered, like, taxation without representation, is that like an early? Well, anyway, I can compromise with you on C, perhaps.
Okay, C is fine. John Dickinson's going to C. All right. Next up, we've got Patrick Henry. You want to start us off with Patrick Henry? You probably have a few things.
Give me time on the stream or give me death. Give me liberty or give me death. Major anti-federalist voice. Helped shape the Bill of Rights and guarded against federal overreach, of course. So one of the things that's really interesting is that he did oppose the Constitution. And one of the things that he said was the biggest issue was that the presidency itself was too strong.
Yep.
So he said, your president may easily become a king. The army is in his hands. And if he be a man of ambition, he may render himself absolute. Lord have mercy. That's some pretty prescient stuff. However, he wasn't universally popular. Jefferson wrote that his imagination was copious, poetic, sublime, but vague also. He said the strongest things in the finest language, but without logic. So, I mean, that's some serious shade from Jefferson. But that's what I got for Patrick Henry. I think he's like a B or a C tier, but I'll let you see if I've missed something.
He was definitely much more influential in the 1770s compared to the 1780s. So like early on, especially he was like the top dog in Virginia, the governor of Virginia, but also the most influential voice until Jefferson began to become more prominent after the Declaration of Independence. And I think his passion was, that's why we always associate that line, give me liberty or give me death, because he gave these really passionate speeches that were something that I think not only influenced his colleagues, but also the general public. But by the 1780s, I would say he was a big reason why many Virginians held out on the Constitution and were anti-federalists. But once the Bill of Rights came around, I think he lost a lot of influence, and because he still was kind of stubborn, I think, and held out. But I would say at least a B.
My vote was C, but we can go B if you'd like.
Chat, what do you think? Oh, someone just said exactly what I just said. I didn't pay them to say that. I'll put him at a B. Well, we don't have very many A's. Okay. I think that's going to change here soon, though. We've got next up. This is a fun one.
Ebenezer Scrooge.
So this is George Wythe. Do you know much about George Wythe?
Wythe.
T-H-E, yeah.
I don't know a lot about him, but I learned a lot about him.
Yeah.
Because he is a person who is an intellectual basis for the idea of judicial review. So there was a case called Commonwealth versus Caton in Virginia in 1782. He wrote, if the whole legislature in an event to be deprecated should attempt to overleap the bounds prescribed by them, I, in administering the public justice of the country, will meet the united powers at my seat in this tribunal and say to them, here is the limits of your authority, and hither shall you go, but no further. So interesting guy. I didn't know that before I read this opinion from him in Virginia. I also know that he was at the College of William and Mary, mentor to Thomas Jefferson, John Marshall, and Henry Clay. But that's just me reading off a piece of paper. So what do you got?
Yeah, I mean, the more I learned about this guy over the summer, the more I was like, oh my gosh, this guy's kind of awesome, because he's like Thomas Jefferson, but somebody with that's less of a hypocrite. He actually owned slaves, but got rid of them and realized he's like, no, slavery is wrong. And he actually just walked the walk, not just talk the talk. And he was a big reason why Thomas Jefferson became, even though he never gave up his own slaves, was against slavery. was because of George Wythe. So he was a mentor to Jefferson, like you said, also John Marshall and Henry Clay, who also became great leaders in American history. I just think that the fact that he was such a morally strong person, I think why he kind of goes up the tiers. I mean, I had him as at least a B, but I think I initially had him as an A because I was really like, oh, this guy's awesome.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah, B sounds good to me.
Okay, all right.
I initially had him as a C because he's just very specifically influential, but not broadly. But yeah, B seems fine.
I bet you hardly anyone watching this right now has heard of this guy.
Well, I mean, even when you said his name, I had to refresh myself on who it was, even though I just researched him. So,
but this guy we all know.
Who's that?
So yeah, I think the reason why many young people learned about this guy was this musical that came out about 10 years ago. But and it's funny because I made a video about him a year before that musical came out. So I take full credit for the musical as well. But we're talking about, of course, Alexander Hamilton, who was not a president, but still on the money like Benjamin Franklin, because one of the most influential founding fathers by far.
Mm-hmm.
We could probably go on for an hour about his influence, but
yes, we could.
Just the highlights: the chief author of the Federalist Papers, the founder of our entire freaking financial system. The reason why we had the whole idea of a central bank. He was like the architect, the U.S. Mint, the first Secretary of Treasury, a big influence at the convention of we need a centralized federal power. It's really important, actually, that we have a strong federal government. When a lot of people were doubting that, he was actually really influential in changing people's minds, saying, no, trust me, bro, this will never work out if we are just letting states do whatever they want. Go on.
He's the best case for radicalism of any, because he's the guy who's always pushing the boundaries and pushing people for taking the most extreme position, right? So on the presidency, he was like, we need someone who serve for life, basically an elected monarch, right? That's crazy, right? But the compromise position that was one strong president, as opposed to the other side of the spectrum, which was like a committee of 3 presidents or whatever the heck, right? We need super strong finances, right? At a time when that's not popular. Eventually, it's proven, and at least in my opinion, that such thought was visionary, right? We need a strong central government because of the mutiny in 1783. The Articles of Confederation are imbecilic, was his quote. Right. He ended up being pretty forward thinking on slavery too, even though that history is complicated. He purchased slaves, etc. But yeah, the Federalist Papers, for no other reason, he wrote a okay, well, the best tier. Okay, but he wrote 70, which was about the judiciary. He wrote 15, which is about how bad the Articles of Confederation were. He wrote 51, which is about the checks and balances being important. He was just a radical that turned out to be right on a lot of things. And so when you think about somebody today who's radical, I'm not saying that every radical you bump into is right. In fact, most radicals are quite irritating. Most radicals are more like Thomas Paine than Alexander Hamilton. But what I am saying is that if you can find that radical who's actually a visionary, flock to that person, man, because they're going to be wrong and right on some things, but they're going to change the way that we see things. Hamilton's one of those people. He's S tier, hands down, no question about it. Imperfect human being like all these founders, but S tier.
I would agree with that. I would also say visionary is the best word to describe him, because it's not just that he wanted these things to happen, but I think he predicted a lot of things that would happen. He just kind of knew how they would go. And sure enough, they have gone that way. It's like if he were to be transported into the year 2025, he'd be like, that's about how I thought it would turn out.
Energetic government is what I think of with Hamilton, right? And that is the Spider-Man line,
too, especially the president. He wanted the president to have a lot of power.
The line from Spider-Man: "Great power, great responsibility." Right? Big power, big responsibility. If you're going to have a federal government with a lot of responsibility, you need the power commensurate with that to actually execute the people's will. You can't have big responsibility and not a big government. And when you're thinking about the debates today about what the federal government should be involved in, you think about on the global stage, you have if you want to think about China as a strategic competitor, not as an enemy, but as a strategic competitor, right? How do you compete on the global stage? with an agrarian republic like Jefferson would have wanted. You can't, right? Hamilton could have predicted what we see today long before a thing. Anyway, okay, this is
similar
Grumpy.
to Hamilton. I would say John Jay was actually similar views to Alexander Hamilton, but yeah, John Jay, just the rundown here. Somebody who I think often gets overlooked as well. First Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Also helped write the Federalist Papers along with Madison and Hamilton, and big time influential with diplomacy. Of course, the Jay Treaty, named after him because he famously negotiated that with Britain to try to ease tensions between the two countries in the 1790s. But as far as like his contributions, I think were mostly after the Constitution was ratified. So I think that kind of brings him down.
5 and 64, which are not the most interesting Federalist Papers. Like Federalist 2 is just kind of like, hey, Providence gave us the ability to do this, aka like God gave us the ability, and we should seize the moment, right? It's more like a pep talk rather than a work of argumentation or real philosophy. But yeah, you're right. And he wrote in defense of the Constitution that so this is someone taking notes on his speech at a ratifying convention. I assume it was New York. John Jay said, reference many instances in which governments vested solely in one man degenerated into tyrannies, and said that 3 branches of power committed to different hands was the most prudent way forward. So this guy's a thinker too. He's just not as prolific as Hamilton or Madison.
Or Jefferson. Yeah. I do think that, and he was also just like he was a governor, Secretary of State for a brief time. But I think his diplomacy often gets forgotten. Also, he was in both, he was both in the First and Second Continental Congress. So that's a big deal. Along with like George Clinton, like big voice representing the entire state of New York. Oh, that book?
Oh, there? Sorry. I know this is annoying. Anyway, but often overlooked, right? But here he is on a book by Joseph J. Ellis. Yeah. The quartet, and who you got here are Washington, Hamilton, Jefferson,
and Jay.
Yeah. Right. So like Jay is not a nobody.
Jay. Okay. Well, are we going to put him on the
B or A? He's an A tier.
See, I originally thought A, but I mean, some people are in the chat are saying no.
Treaty of Paris helped negotiate in 1783.
Oh, that's right. The Treaty of Paris
cleaned up both that and the later treaty.
You know what? I think, yes, we need another A tier anyway. I think John Jay deserves A tier. Let's do it. Sleeper indeed. All right. And now another John Marshall, aka Little John, as I like to call him, the most influential Chief Justice in American history. The only thing about him is that he was also a youngin during the American Revolution and during the early years of the Republic. So when we see this picture of him on the screen right now, this is actually him in the 1830s. So, I know that book. Yeah. Yeah, he's a big reason why the Supreme Court is relevant. Of course, the whole idea of judicial review becoming a reality with the Supreme Court was because of him. But I mean, is there anything more to say other than the fact that he made the Supreme Court a force to be reckoned with?
No, there is one thing to say, which is that all fine booksellers across the country are selling the power of our Supreme Court, how Supreme Court cases shape democracy by a Matt Beat.
Oh, okay.
This is the guy who does like $10,000 per question videos on YouTube.
Oh my gosh, that I did not pay him to say this. Okay, thank you for promoting my book. Yep. But the thing is, like, the only hang up I have with John Marshall, Little John, is like, okay, his influence came arguably more after, like, we're talking the early 1800s is when he started to have more influence, and so is he even a founding father? I mean,
he studied law under George Wythe, who was a founding father.
There you go.
He served in the ratifying convention, so I think he is a founder in that regard, but just barely. He like makes the cut.
Yeah.
He's a nepo baby of the founding family.
All right, chat. Where should we put John Marshall? I had him down as
an American. You know, we could put him higher up, but as a founder, it's almost like you said, he's almost like a C or a D founder.
I was gonna say I had him A or B, but if you're saying C or D,
well, we gave people a lot of credit for what they were doing in the early 1800s. So you're right. I think he's, in terms of influence, and I mean, Judicial Review is big. I mean, you can't really name very many pivotal moments in American history without talking about Judicial Review. So in that sense, he's A, and the fact that Judicial Review is not in the Constitution, and yet it is now almost like a presumed addition to the Constitution, would make you say that it's almost like an addendum that he wrote to the Constitution.
All right, I think we'll put him at B. All right, so we just got two more left. We've got Gouverneur Morris.
Oh, yeah.
I'll let you begin with this one.
Gouverneur Morris is from New York, and he is a strong opponent of slavery, which we've kind of leaned in. But I think the thing that he's most famous for is that he rewrote a little bit of the preamble, because the preamble of the Constitution was going to be, "We the people of Massachusetts, New York, Delaware, Virginia," right? And he was like, "Whoa, we the people of the United States." So if you've ever been on the tour of the Capitol building here in Washington, and the big deep baritone bass voice comes on and says, "We the people of the United States of America," that's Gouverneur Morris.
Yep, that's him.
He argued at the convention vocally when others sat back and didn't argue about slavery, including Alexander Hamilton. Part of what makes him complicated is that he was pretty quiet at the convention on that topic. Gouverneur Morris said, "Upon what principle is it that the slaves shall be computed in the representation? Are they men? Then make them citizens and let them vote. Are they property? Why then is no other property included?" So he's tackling the big issue of the time straight on in the Constitutional Convention in ways that people we put in the S tier were too cowardly to do. So I think for that reason, he's important. He also changed the language of Article 2. I think that's for another conversation, but I learned this while I was researching him. And as someone who's obsessed with Article 2 at the moment because of unitary executive theory, I thought the original draft of Article 2 that was then edited by Gouverneur Morris was fascinating, but no time. He is a B in my book.
I would say at least a B. Yeah, definitely an influential intellectual heavyweight at the convention itself. You mentioned the preamble. He authored much of the Constitution's final text, working close with Madison on that, and he spoke more than anyone else. Other than maybe James Wilson. But the difference is, he was more courageous than most of the founding fathers, and he just told it how he really felt. He didn't hold back at all. He wasn't trying to necessarily appeal to Southerners. He's like, screw it. I'm just gonna say, if this idea is radical, I'm going with it anyway. I don't care. Shout out to Mr. Betts, or Drawn of History did a great video on Gouverneur Morris. And what are you thinking, chat?
He also has a name that sounds like a title, which I think really bumps him up the list, right? Like you'd be like, "Oh, Gouverneur, was he like a French bureaucrat?" And it's like, no, that's just his first name.
I actually had him as A tier.
All right, I could go with that. Let's put him in A tier.
Some people are saying S tier. Wow.
Hell yeah.
Man, good job drawing a history influencing these youngins to like him. All right, we'll go A tier. And then that just leaves George Mason.
Oh, Mason, another anti-federalist.
I'm a big George Mason fan. I mean, there's a reason why there's a university that's named after him, even though I don't know if he started it or not. But regardless, he's a very influential figure that often gets overlooked. He's the biggest reason why we have a Bill of Rights. I know James Madison wrote the Bill of Rights, but as far as who came up with the ideas initially, I think he doesn't get enough credit for that.
The Virginia Declaration of Rights asserted inherent rights to press, religion, jury trial.
That's what we're talking about. Yep.
like you just said. And then all men are by nature equally free and independent and have certain inherent rights, namely the enjoyment of life, liberty, with the means of acquiring and possessing property. Once again, this Lockean thing that we've been going back over and over again, but he's writing it a little bit beforehand.
Yeah, he's writing this stuff in the 1770s when this stuff becomes mainstream in the 1790s. So early adopter of stuff, heavily influenced the other founding fathers. As far as like government experience, not that impressive. He was in
maybe the most influential most influential anti-federalist, and that, like, you know, he wrote to Washington in 1787. His objections to the Constitution are not numerous, ... though in my mind some of them are capital ones. So he's the one that helped strike the deal to get the Bill of Rights. So if we're going to include, John Marshall up higher because he basically forced through addendums to the Constitution, then George Mason has to go up there too.
I had him as A tier. What do you think?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. A tier, which is funny. On Constitution Day, a man who opposed the Constitution is A tier. But it makes sense. It's on point, right? Because
he died like shortly after the Bill of Rights actually went. Did he, in his final days, actually support it? I don't know. I don't know. But regardless, I do have to pick up my daughter. And so we do have to wrap this up. But there you have it, our tier list and I apologize again for not getting Robert Livingston on there. If Robert Livingston was on this, I would probably put him at like C. So just imagine Robert Livingston on here.
Yeah, we had some honorable mentions. Rufus King.
Oh, Rufus King is another one. Who was the other one?
Henry Knox, who was
Knox,
for Secretary of War, who was not at the Constitutional Convention, but did help convince Washington that a constitutional convention was necessary.
I like it. If there's other honorable mentions, please let us know in the chat. Obviously, you can't get them all, but these are just a few that I've been reading about lately that were on my mind. And I was like, oh, this would be fun to make a tier list. So final thoughts here. Just, this was fun. Will, it's always a pleasure to have you on. Everyone check out his channel.
William C. Fox. I've rebranded 100,000 times. So eventually I was just like, if I use my name, I won't have to rebrand unless a future spouse of mine is like, change that last name right now.
I gotta get out of this, but yeah, this is that was really itchy, but I'm glad this is fun. We did this for Constitution Day, and may the Constitution live forever. It's my favorite document. And
it's been long overdue since we live streamed like this together. We've been on a few live streams together. Like the Dole became a live stream. We were on with Cynical Historian once together, but like I haven't been on your channel directly in a long time, not since we collaborated on Puerto Rico and DC Compared. So
really,
yeah,
it's been that long.
It has. Okay. So it's good to be back, and it's good to, so it's good. It's good to be here. Thanks, everyone.
All right, thanks for watching, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Bye.